Hey guys, I've been. It's all over now for today. Had a pint at the old Black Swan, which is our social hub, I think. And I'm here with Jamie Atkinson. And
hey,
Jamie, you did a talk, didn't you?
I did indeed.
And so this is a speaker from the conference, Jamie.
It is.
But you have a YouTube channel, don't you?
I do. It's called Expedition Dogman, where we look at the scientific principles behind the cryptid creature.
Right. Yeah.
And the talk I did today was called "Werewolves Are Not What You Think," which was actually, funnily enough, the second ever video I put onto YouTube back in July last year.
Yeah, the Dogman, because I'm familiar with werewolves and Dogmen, but like many of these things you see in Hollywood, over the coming years I've realised there is actually some reality behind a lot of these things you see in the movies.
There is, but it's a very psychological explanation I'm going to give you about it.
Sure.
Hollywood have got 2 and 2, and as we know, 2 and 2 is normally 4. They've come out with 6.
All right.
So what they've done is they've got a picture of a dogman, and they've got hold of a mental disorder which is known as clinical lycanthropy. Now, lycanthropy is a terminology known as werewolfism. I can't remember why it's outside, but yeah, werewolf is the other word for it.
I thought lycanthropy just meant being a werewolf, turning into a wolf.
Yeah,
things like that.
but it's more of a mental
creature.
thing, because it does happen on the full moon. But instead of physically changing, you get the pains of changing, you go through the actions of changing, but you don't physically change, but your brain believes you do.
Alright.
So what they did is they thought, oh, if we mix up this dogman wolf walking creature, we can exaggerate it. And this first happened in Universal Studio in 1935, when they came out with American Werewolf in London.
In 1935?
1935.
I thought that was a John Landon's film from, I think, 75 or 77 or something.
No, the original was 1935.
Oh, I didn't realise it was a remake.
I did a lot of study through werewolves and modern culture through the History Channel, and that's what they're saying, which is more or less accurate because they'll have it from direct sources.
I'll have to watch the original now because I'm a big fan of the John Landis film.
Yeah.
I'll have to watch the original.
So, as we know with Hollywood, they like to exaggerate things out of proportion.
Oh, yes.
And the problem is, moving on from the 30s onwards, people were going to the cinema, they would go watching things on TV, so it's implanted into their brain. So you got a thing called programming.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what happened. So, if we was walking down the road now, and we saw a dogman across the road hypothetically, which could possibly happen.
Yeah. Keep a look out, I've got the camera on just in case.
You never know. Our brain would automatically go, shit, that's a werewolf. Because that's what we've seen over the years.
It's like a half dog, half wolf, half man.
Half wolf, yeah.
A humanoid cane is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's actually a cryptid creature. Yeah. And that was the essence of my talk, really.
No, it's not actually a human who's turned into a wolf.
No, this is a real flesh and blood cryptid creature.
Let's go slightly ahead of you, so I can still record you. So
yeah, no, that's fine. It's a real life cryptid creature, just like Bigfoot, and it's been on this planet as long as Bigfoot has.
But how does it stay hidden? I mean, if there's obviously because
they live in the trees. If you spin the camera around, you've got tree lines.
Yeah, tree lines.
Now, this cryptid is an apex predator. Yes.
Okay, top of the food chain.
I'm sorry to tell everybody on YouTube right now, we are not top of the food chain, so please don't go around panicking.
I'll try not to, but it is.
Try not to.
Yeah.
We are not the top of the food chain.
No.
We like to think we are, but we're not.
Yeah.
And if you go onto my channel, there's a lot of information about all this. But what would an apex predator do to get the lay of the land and stay hidden? It'd go into the trees.
Yeah,
and
good for you. You're hidden.
Does exactly the same thing.
Yeah,
they live in the trees.
It's you can see for a long way. Also, you're pretty much hidden, especially in the summer when there's leaves.
Yes, and also the fur is more or less, due to the trick of the light, camouflaging into the leaves. So literally, if you've all seen the film Predator,
yeah, that's good. Where he has an invisibility cloak.
No, it's not an invisibility cloak. He's still physically there. He's got some sort of technology on him that bends the light around him.
Yeah.
So it makes him look as though he's invisible. It's a trick of the mind.
I see, because the military are working on things like that right now
Yes.
for camouflage. Quasar crystals. Yeah.
Now, Bigfoot and Dogmen have this ability built into their fur.
Oh, blimey, yeah. So it's like a natural quasi
It's natural
crystals.
for them, yeah. Because
Wow.
they've evolved with that over the years
Yeah.
to remain hidden from us.
I see.
Yeah, that's basically about it with that sort of technology. And it's how they remain hidden.
Because I mean, the number of reports of like dog humanoid creatures is incredible. I mean, they're all over the place.
They're all
You
over
put up
the
a map. You put a map, and North America has like so many. You couldn't even
That's
see
the
them.
thing, North America, the reason there's more over there is due to the government.
You mentioned
Now-
there was a cover-up.
It is. Now, I don't want your channel to get banned or anything,
No, not good.
considering YouTube
We were
is
banned years ago,
actually
mate.
American,
Yeah.
but the American government are breeding these creatures because they're using them for military purposes.
Oh, really? So rather like they
Yes.
use fierce dogs, they're also using
They're
these
using
dogmen.
what they term as werewolves
Oh, blimey,
to
yeah.
fight on the front lines. Now, not all of these dogmen are behaving like the government want them to, and these are the ones that are getting released into the national parks.
Bloody heck.
So if you look at the land between the lakes, that is their main dumping ground.
Between the lakes, is that the Great Lakes?
Land between the lakes, it's called. It's also known as the LBL. If you look at Kentucky, it's
Yeah.
around that area.
Kentucky. There's land between lakes, Kentucky.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
If you just type into Google, or into Google Maps, land between the lakes, it'll come up.
I see. Yes,
And this is their main dumping ground, but it's also a major breeding ground for dogmen, because dogmen migrate from Mexico all the way through America. There's different breeding grounds. It's the same with Bigfoot. They've got their own breeding grounds across America, and then they continue up to the Canadian Peninsula, where there's a massive ice sheet that runs between Canada and Russia.
yeah,
which is
the
about-
polar ice sheet, yeah.
That's
The
the
North
one.
Pole.
And according to a good source of mine in America, this is how the dogmen are getting into Europe.
I see.
They're going up through Canada and they're pelting it across this ice sheet in a day.
Blimey. And then they can
And then
get,
coming down.
It is possible to walk from
It's possible to
North
walk.
America to Siberia for most of the year because of the sea ice.
Yes.
That's right.
And this is how these things are travelling around the world. Also, like Richard Feynman said about there being Bigfoot that's real and the paranormal, it's highly possible it's the same with dogmen, that certain types of species have evolved so far to interdimensionally jump,
Alright, so they can move from...
which would be more of a case with the ones of the Native American folklore.
Exactly, they can disappear.
Pretty
And
much.
a lot
the Beast of Bray Road is
a
a
lo-
perfect example.
The Beast of
Bray Road.
Bray Road. What's that? What does that do? What did it do? What?
It didn't really do anything. It's a strange one. I'll tell you the bloody story of the LBL in a minute, but
Okay,
the
mate, yeah.
the Beast of Bray Road, it's a guardian of the Native American cemeteries. It's never attacked anybody, but it's chased people and ran alongside cars. Obviously it's mutilated wildlife, but it's a food source.
Yeah.
It's of course it's going to do that. But
You mentioned there were
the
different...
reporter who found it and started asking around, she got a map of the area and pinpointed with little pins where the people were seeing this creature, and every pin was more or less around a Native American cemetery
That's interesting.
near
isn't
their
it?
mounds, which is very interesting. And she dug back into Native American folklore, and there were stories of dog-headed creatures as well as Sasquatch.
That's strange, isn't it? Because like...
So
yeah.
if you look at the early modern history of dogmen, you can pinpoint them back to there. Whereas in ancient history, the earliest recordings is ancient Egypt and ancient Greece.
Well, there's like Anubis. There's actually a deity
yes.
which at the head of a jackal, body of a man. I mean, there's cave paintings with the therianthropes, they're called, therianthropes,
That's one.
which include like human bodies, animal heads,
Yeah.
I think of all kinds. I mean, not just wolves, but all kinds. This is like many of these paranormal or supernatural phenomena or cryptozoological phenomena. They go back a long way into prehistory, and people have been encountering them.
Centuries.
Yeah.
Thousands of years.
Well, you reckon you said they've probably been here long before we were. They're the original inhabitants.
I do. I was just going to come on to that.
So,
if you
yeah,
look
carry
at
on.
the original inhabitants of this planet, Bigfoot and Dogman are the most likely candidates, because if you look at Charles Darwin's theory of evolution, there's a missing link.
Yeah, he called it that. Yeah, he realised his theory was incomplete.
Now, there's a perfect image on Google where it shows humans coming up like this apparently, but there's a link missing to where they're straightened out fully.
Yeah.
This is where the Anunnaki come involved.
Are they those who came from heaven to earth? Yeah.
Yes.
The Sumerian myth.
From the heavens.
Yeah.
The actual technology, not from heaven.
Other
from
worlds.
The heavens, i.e. the stars. And this is also to do with the Mayans. It's roughly all around that era. But when they got listening to history, it was due to the Hebrews.
Right, yeah.
And if you look at the Hebrew Bible, in the original Hebrew text, you've got the word Elohim.
Yes, with
Now,
I am on the end, yeah.
Him, in Hebrew, is plural.
Yes, right, like in words like cherubim, seraphim, it has I am on
Exactly.
the end. The same way English puts an S on the end of the word to form a plural.
Exactly.
Hebrew just puts I am, that's
So,
right.
if you look at a modern day Bible, it says God created man in his image.
That's right, yeah.
That's the singular translation. The original translation, this is going to blow your mind wide open. Let's create man in our image. Our is plural.
Plural, yeah.
That means the Anunnaki are the most likely candidates for creating the human being.
Do you believe...
So what I honestly believe they did was they got DNA from Bigfoot, because we do share similarities to Bigfoot. So that's the likely candidate where they got part of the gene seed from.
Right.
Then they took the gene seed out of themselves, because if you look at a picture of an Anunnaki, they're very similar. Pardon me? They're very similar to a human being.
They are.
The likeliness of them is.
Do you think there's some interbreeding? Because in Genesis chapter 12, they say that the Elohim came down to earth, saw the daughters of men, saw that they were fair, took of them many wives, who gave them many heirs, and those heirs became the wise men of renown.
Yes. So if you look at that passage that Ben has just said, what they did was they intersected the gene seeds from both. They took the gene seed from Bigfoot, the gene seed from themselves, and interbred.
And it implies that also that this hybrid race became the elite bloodlines, you know, the wise men of renown.
Yes.
The kings,
if
emperors.
You look further into the Holy Bible as well, you've got St. Christopher. Now, St. Christopher originally was a dog-human hybrid.
All right. Because he carried Jesus across the water, didn't he?
Apparently so, yes.
He's the patron saint of travellers. You have a St. Christopher.
Yes.
Take St. Christopher medallion with you if you go on a journey.
Yes. Now, St. Christopher was actually a dog-headed human. And he was only granted a human form when he fully believed in Jesus.
All right.
Also, if you look at ancient Greek mythology, you've got King Lycan.
Lycan as in Lyco.
Lycan.
Yeah.
Lycanthrope.
Wolves, yeah.
Now, King Lycan, he upset Zeus. I think he served him the wrong type of food. It was something like that. It was something to do with food. And it was spoiled. So Zeus decided to lay a curse on him.
Right.
That he would spend the rest of his days as a wolf, but he would be allowed to walk around on his hind legs.
Oh my goodness.
Here we go.
Yeah.
The original, according to the Greek mythology...
It's the original kind of werewolf-like creature, or Dogman.
Yes. Whereas a new base is ancient Egypt. Both of these gods, if you look at the ancient gods of Rome, Norway, Greece, Egypt, they all have different names, but they're all the same image.
It's the same physical form, isn't it?
Yeah, same form, different names.
Yeah, it's worth considering. If you think we're talking nonsense, ask how so many different... Yeah, how many different cultures come up with the same image? The same image, cultures that never had any connection to each other. Cultures that are very different.
Image of the same gods. These gods were not from this planet, they were not from the heavens, they were from a different dimension.
Yeah.
They visited different countries at the same time there was here. This is the point we're trying to get at. So as they're visiting different countries, they're getting different names.
Yeah.
It's
according to the local names, the local language.
Yeah. It's mind-boggling stuff, but it's the theory that makes the most sense of the origins of the human race, but also the origins of the Dogman.
It's well, that's a big locked gate. I wonder what's behind there. Looks a bit sinister, doesn't it? Very Illuminati, that, doesn't it?
Well, let's not get me started on the Illuminati.
I don't think you viewers can see this. Actually, it may not be visible to you. There's a big locked gate with barbed wires.
Yeah, let's not get started on the Illuminati tonight. That's another subject.
I know what you mean. There's too much to talk about, but it's interesting that you mentioned there were 3 types of Dogman. Well, what are the 3 different types?
You've got the Type 3 canine type, which is the amber eyes. For those of you in England who know Barmston Drain, you've got the Beast of Barmston Drain. It's a wolf-like creature that had amber eyes. This is exactly how it was reported. If you look throughout the majority of Dogman reports, the amber eyes are very significant. This is a Type 3 Dogman. Then you've got the more human looking Dogman. This is generally known as your Type 9. It's got more humanoid legs, whereas the Type 3 has more canine legs.
Yeah.
Then you've got reports of some looking like jackals, some looking like hyenas, some, like Richard's friend said, have a baboon face. All of these are very aggressive. If you step onto their territory, if they're not hungry, rather than killing you, they will play sadistic games.
Oh dear.
They will happily scare you for the fun of it, just because they can. If you're hiding in your car, there's a Dogman, it will happily walk up, grin at you, showing all its fangs, and start tapping on your window.
Oh my God.
Just to say, I'm here.
That's scary.
What are you going to do about it? These are the type of games they will play.
Making people very scared, or
very much so,
animals. Yeah. It's to do with, they often get some sustenance and that through adrenochrome or through psychic energy.
Yes.
And so whether,
yes, they do.
They have to actually drink your blood to get their adrenochrome, but they can get a psychic spear off that.
They do drink your blood as such, but they will happily kill you if they're hungry. If there's no other food source around, they will think nothing about eating a human. This is why we're going back to the point of we are not the top predator on this planet.
Exactly, yeah.
Bigfoot and Dogmen will quite happily eat a human if they so want to.
Yeah.
And the reason I keep bringing Bigfoot up is because there's a lot of similarities in behavioural patterns with both of these cryptids. Yes, obviously one's an ape, one's a canine. I know you're going to get that in the comments. Oh, wait a minute, Dogman a canine! Yeah, they are. But these creatures have inhabited the world side by side since the beginning of time. So, of course, behavioural patterns will be similar. Yes, there's differences, as we all know, but there will be similarities between the pair of them.
I suppose that's true, yeah, that's true. I know what you mean. It's interesting, yeah. I mean, I'll keep my eye out for things. I mean, it's a bit spooky. I'm glad I'm not alone walking along here, actually, because it's actually pretty spooky when there's no cars around, and traffic's intermittent tonight, as you can see.
It's quite quiet.
It's quiet, and it's
plane coming into the airport. If you look over there.
Some landing lights over there, yeah.
Landing lights coming into Manchester Airport. Yeah.
But when you go sky watching, looking for UFOs, you soon spot things like that.
Yeah.
And you learn the difference between what's normal in the sky and what's unusual. But you know, I'm walking along here. Whenever you get these malevolent phenomena.
Lift your camera up here a second. Something could easily be hiding in this tree line.
Yeah.
Without us knowing it.
Yeah. That's it. I know what you mean. It's what's I suppose like the The phenomena, right?
Around here.
Yeah. Whenever there are like malevolent phenomena of any kind, whether it's cryptozoological or just paranormal.
You get the sense of foreboding, you get negative feelings.
The people who disappear in huge numbers.
Yeah,
I mean, you know how many people bloody disappear? It's unbelievable.
Quite a few. Now, that's interesting that disappearing. In America,
they always pick on people walking alone at night. Have you noticed that in remote areas like we're doing right now?
Exactly. We could easily be picked off tonight if
they want to do it, we'd be on the top of their list.
Well, we would.
Or close to the top. I mean, we're on a big road.
Yes, but if you look in America, the amount of people that go missing in the national parks for no reason.
Yeah.
Bodies that are never found.
Yeah.
As we know, within the national parks of America, these are cryptid hotspots.
Yeah. Sometimes they're found like weeks later in places that have already been searched 3 times. You know, things like that. David Paulides and his missing 411 films worth seeing. Very disturbing to watch.
Very disturbing. But the question is then, why are they picking them off in the woods?
Yeah.
Food source.
Yeah, I suppose that's it. If you were like every other game animal, you know, you're there to, and they will take you. And
think about it.
Yeah.
There's
other predators, known predators, do. Cougars and bears do them, known predators. So why not unknown ones?
At our eyes, we don't have predator eyes. We can only see what's in front of us and a certain peripheral vision.
Yeah.
Exactly the same as horses and other prey animals, their eyes can see a certain way.
Yeah.
Whereas if you look at an eagle, they can see more or less 360 around them. Why is that? Because an eagle is a predator.
They can also, they can see things at great distances. Very sharp eyes. They could see like things that we can't. Like they could see like a fly crawling on the wall over there, you know, the house. You know, really very, very good eyesight.
Yes. Why is that? Because they're a predator.
Yeah.
Why can't humans see it? I think there's only one answer to that question.
Yeah. Well, you know what?
I will let you decide that for yourself.
Oh, well, the battery's nearly flat now, I think, because we can't do much more filming on this journey. But so let the viewers know about you, Jamie, because say your YouTube channel again.
Expedition Dogman.
Expedition Dogman. Remember, think of Expedition Bigfoot, but put Dogman instead of Bigfoot.
Dogman instead.
Well, thank you very much for letting us. Thanks very much for talking to us.
You're welcome.
And thanks for your very interesting talk at the Weird Weekend North 2022.
You're very welcome.
So we've reached the end of day 1, and what a day it's been. And I've never known a conference that I think packs so much in, so much information, so much to learn, so much to absorb. I mean, it's really been quite something. It's really been wow. It's unlike most conferences. It hasn't gone quickly. It's gone quite slow. It's been kind of. It seems ages ago that I got here. It's amazing. And I've had a wonderful time. I had a wonderful talk in the pub with people. Great conversation with Jamie just there. Really fascinating stuff. And you know, when the battery was flat, otherwise we would have recorded more. But it's really interesting stuff there. Well, it's not over yet. It's only halfway. So on to day 2 tomorrow. So I've got plenty of time. I can relax. I can sleep as much as I like. So that's great. And I've got my lovely breakfast waiting for me in the morning. Yeah, it's quite a life. I do recommend it. Night night, everyone. See you in the morning. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. It is it's 7:30 in the morning. It's 7:30 a.m. and it is Sunday morning here, Junction 21 of the M6 at the not the Travelodge, the Premier Inn. Oh, what a day yesterday. And of course, as what often happens at these conferences, I don't always get time to do a full review of every single speaker as and when they happen. Sometimes I have to delay the particular review that I want to do until afterwards. And that's what I've had to do this time with Bob Fisher. Now, Bob Fisher, ever since I interviewed Glenn on her Paranormal Radio, I think Bob Fisher is the upcoming speaker that most intrigued me, based simply just with a preview of his talk. And his previous talk was called Haunted Generation. And what's interesting is it struck a chord with me, actually, because what he refers to by haunted generation is people who were born roughly between the mid-1960s and the late 1970s.
Now, I fall into that category. I won't tell you exactly where I fall into it, early or late, but I do fall into that bracket. And there's a particular kind of atmosphere or milieu or energy associated with a childhood during that era. Funny thing about decades, decades don't. It's funny. I've often thought this. Decades don't actually exist until at least another 10 years has passed. Things people talk about the 60s. People talk about the 60s, but in 1971, people weren't talking about the 60s because it was virtually. It was so. The 60s only just ended, and it was still virtually the present. The same goes for the 70s. I don't remember being a child in the 80s and people talking about the 70s. They may have mentioned it. They may have said it, as an awareness that decade existed. But they didn't use the term. They didn't use the word the 70s in the same way that people use the word the 70s today, and indeed have done since probably around about the early 1990s. It was only sort of really in the early 90s that people started talking about the 70s the way they do today, in terms of, the 70s, remember? Yeah, sweets they don't make anymore, Cracker Jack, flares, discos, man, and things like that, platform shoes, synth bands. People didn't talk about that in 1981. They talked about that in 1991. And indeed, it's now we're in the early 2020s. I've noticed people started talking about saying things like the 2000s or the noughties, as they're sometimes called, NOUGHTYEIS, rather than, or the first decade, they sometimes call it, 21st century first decade. I think they just call it the 2000s is most obvious, the same way people talked about the 1900s and 1910s, they just call it the 1900s. But it didn't exist until about 2020. That's because I think a certain amount of time has to pass before people can really associate a decade in that way. In a decade in the sense of the entire culture that goes with that decade. Certain time has to pass. The parodies of 80s culture didn't really exist until early 2000s. Funny adverts started coming out with people with mullet haircuts and leg warmers, jawbreakers. I remember those well. And so the 70s really didn't exist until the 70s didn't exist until the early 90s. But then, of course, the people who'd grown up in that era were now adults, and that may be another reason, because it's something you have to be an adult and have memories of to really understand that decade. That's another reason. And it's really the term haunted generation, referring to people born in that era, now middle-aged, is because from a Fortean standpoint, in fact, Bob actually wrote an article for Fortean Times in 2018. I'd probably like to get a copy of that. I could probably get it from their website. I reckon you could probably order individual articles like you do Nexus, for a couple of pounds. I might like to read that. But why haunted? Because there was something spooky about, by today's standards, there was something rather spooky about being a child in the 70s. For example, the TV Bagpuss. Now, Bagpuss is still popular. It's, of course, these days you can get all these old programs so easily. You don't even have to go out and buy VHS cassettes. They're all online. And I know lots of kids today are actually watching Bagpuss. Bagpuss is a TV series that I think it was made in the 60s, very popular in the 70s, I remember it. When you look at the essence of it, it's about a house. It's obviously set in the past. Now, another thing associated with the fiction at that time and literature was that there was a strong sense of past and future. The past influencing the present. There were lots of books that came out actually in the 70s, referring to sort of associating with legends like the Owl Service. I vaguely remember the Owl Service. I think we read it at school. We went through it at school, English class. And at the same time, things like that. Bagpuss clearly set in the Edwardian era, probably early 20th century. And when you look at the essence of it, it's about a house full of haunted toys. Toys which have a kind of, who are animated by ghosts. And there were lots of other TV programs a bit very spooky, but the spookiest thing of all, the creepiest thing of all, and I remember being scared by these things very well, were the public information films. They used to have these. They used to have these programs on. They used to have these like adverts. They weren't adverts. They were slipped in, very short, just a few minutes long, slipped in between programs and other adverts. You know, you get your standard classic 70s advert for milk tray. The lady loves milk tray, and the right one, it's martini, and all these other classic adverts. And then you'd have this is a public information film, and then sometimes there'd be this weird little kid with a kind of zombie voice, an animated program, a little kid with a kind of very zombie voice like that, and he had a cat called Charlie, and the cat was very animated. He used to go and he used to eat a fish at the end of every advert, going like that, and it would say, "This is a public information film." And there'd be all kinds of other warning. It was usually warning things, something to do with stay. You know, there's this really creepy one: stay away from deep water. And it would be, it says, "I am the ghost of deep water." And there's like the Grim Reaper type character sitting there with a scythe. And then sometimes it got really graphic. So you sometimes see a dead body floating in the water. And this would warn the kids to stay away from deep water. One very graphic one I remember was people warning you about, there were two adverts warning you to stay away from electricity supplies, so you don't get electrocuted. One was a kid who breaks into an electricity substation to retrieve his frisbee and ends up being electrocuted. You don't see very much of that. But then the next one is a kid who flies a kite next to a pylon, which again you shouldn't do, in case there is some kind of electrical contact and you get like a current, which kills you if you're holding the kite. And this kid does get killed after the kite touches the pylon, live wire, and he's like, and it's graphic. You actually see him fall down, and his body's burning. They must have used a dummy for it. And I mean, surely these were shown to children. These were shown during the schools programs, not the schools. The schools program was something different. These were shown during children's TV, when children's TV was on. And I remember being very disturbed by them. Of course, the logic is if you scare the kids enough, don't worry, scare the kids. Frighten the crap out of them, and they'll be okay, because at least they won't go back to a firework once it's lit. And that's good, isn't it? We're doing a good thing by scaring the crap out of these kids and giving them nightmares. What they didn't realise was that children are very sensitive to this sort of thing, and some in particular can be traumatised by it. And I myself was a very sensitive child. I was a very miserable child, actually. And my parents were worried about me. They took me to see my first experience of the evils of psychology and the weaponisation of psychology. Was actually being taken to see child psychologists when I was a little kid. That's a long story, anyway. But these public information, that's really, really horrible. And there was something actually. He said there was something esoteric even about the TV viewing experience in the 70s, because it was analog technology, which means, there was no network you were on. The TV was like an analog radio. It picked up signals with an aerial. Sometimes an aerial on top of the TV itself, and you had to sometimes move it around. Usually it's an aerial on the roof of your house. I still see a few of these TV aerials on the roofs of houses, usually in small villages where the technology is sometimes slightly behind, or people haven't bothered to take them down. There's no cable underground. There was no digital signal. It was all analog. But see, what that means, when you lost the signal, the TV, you did used to get like the breakups like you do with a digital file or digital download. You got like lines on the TV, and it used to go fuzzy. And you get this snowstorm pattern on the TV, and it was very spooky. I used to stare into the snowstorm pattern and try to look for shapes. And that's actually an inspiration for a really good horror film called White Noise. It's really good if you got to see that horror film. Younger people have told me, my daughter has actually told me, there is a parallel between the haunted generation and the millennials who grew up in the 90s, who were children in the 90s. Because they had the X-Files, and that's a story for another time. There was something a bit similar to that, apparently. There's a kind of new kind of retro music and culture emerging. There's something called hauntology, and there's actually a website called Scarfolk, which I'll have to look up. I can't get Wi-Fi in here. I think I'm still on the free network, which doesn't really do any good. But there was a connection between TV presenters and the occult. There was this TV presenter who was on all the children's programs called Tony Arthur. That was a woman. I don't remember her. It may be sort of early haunted generation before me. But she apparently was into witchcraft and Wicca and things like that. And there was this was also a generation in which the adults of that time were basically sort of like they were baby boomers or earlier, the greatest or silent generations, who had rediscovered folk music after World War II. So this was kind of where the folk music revival had been around for a long time and had become ingrained. And indeed, some of these folk songs, because in the late 1940s there was a massive effort to go and record folk songs, and a lot of bands came out of that, which became very famous, like Jethro Tull. There's lots of folk rock bands like that. They were big in the 60s, and a lot of the music actually had supernatural themes. And indeed, we talked about this, came up early, didn't it, with Rob Gandy, where he talked about the Lillywhite Boys, the song about the Lillywhite Boys. That's basically a part of that folk revival. There's also a big sense of the past and future. As I said, the past was stories of the past, legends, and like the Owl Service is all about some people who live in South Wales, a group of children who live in South Wales, and they're influenced by a recurring legend which goes back into Welsh folklore. And there was a lot of sense of the future as well. This was the generation in which space exploration was a real thing. It wasn't just, some millionaire going up to the International Space Station. This was where you saw people walking on the moon, and I know you know my opinions on that, but for the purposes of this conversation, you saw people walking on the moon. And it was always, there was predictions were made, and indeed these predictions were correct. If the current rate of progress had continued, people were predicting being able to build a house on the moon or Mars and going there and living there. And this was all predicted before the end of the century. And which was perfectly acceptable. That was perfectly rational to believe when you consider the entire Apollo program only took 10 years to develop. Less than 10 years. Kennedy said, the 60s was like, we'll land a man on the moon and bring him safely back to Earth before the end of the decade. They made it by 5 months. 5 months to spare. But there was also a lot of... there was a hell of a lot of dystopian visions of the future too. This was during the peak of the Cold War. And in the 70s, a lot of people predicted... I remember my parents thought this. I was a little kid, obviously, but they said, when we may get to see 1980, but I don't think we'll live through the 80s. There's going to be some kind of big war. These are people who remembered... The parents and the older siblings at that time remember the Cuban Missile Crisis. At some point, something's going to break and we're going to blow each other up. We're going to blow ourselves up. And this caused a lot of dystopian literature as well. And some of it got through to the kids. There was a film called Threads, I remember, and this actually came up on the Third Rail Radio last week with Trevor Murray. He's of a similar sort. He's also from this haunted generation, albeit in Canada. Maybe it was slightly different. But he watched Threads, and it's a horrible film made in, I think, 1983 about nuclear holocaust and the aftermath. There's another similar one in the United States called The Day After, which is very similar, slightly less gritty, but still very, very disturbing. And there was a sense that maybe the future wasn't all rosy. We weren't going to get our condominium on Mars. And that by the end of the century, there wouldn't be anyone left in the world because we'd have killed each other. No one was talking about disease and that. There was not much talk about disease in those days. I mean, no, people. It was the nuclear threat was so big it overwhelmed every other possible dystopian scenario. Now you can take your pick. It's either zombies, or it's meteors or comets, or it's the Carrington event, or it's all these kinds of things. Back then, it was all very. It was all very sort of like clear what it was. The threat was the Cold War, Soviet Union, and that danger. And there was an adaptation of the Day of the Triffids. I think that was that. I remember it too well, probably for it to have been the 70s. I think that's probably the early 80s. But you see, you often got to think there's all this fuss about child locks and things on the internet to stop children accessing inappropriate content. And I very much agree with that. However, in a way, that was a bigger problem for the haunted generation, because it's hard to imagine nowadays. But when you were growing up in that time, when you were a child in that time, you had. You had basically just imagine just having one TV in your house, just one TV in your house, and rather than the thousands of channels you have now, you just had 3 channels. There's BBC One, BBC Two, and ITV, and the ITV would be the various regions which it is today. It was in the format. It was still ITV was actually in the formation in those days that it is today with the regions, and. Which means that rather than going off to your own room and, watching what you wanted on your iPhone, you had to sit downstairs in the lounge with your parents and your other siblings, and you had to argue, negotiate, persuade, cajole, bribe, threaten, whatever, however you sorted it out about what you were going to watch. Whether it was let's have Play School. No, I want to watch Galloping Galaxies on ITV and things like that. I remember having arguments with my brother about that, which side you watch. It's worth watching the schools programmes, actually, because they're quite funny. I mean, they're all on YouTube now. Words and pictures. Picture box. La 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 la. Oh, nostalgia. A lot of it's quite creepy. I remember the presenter of Picture Box reminded me of one of my teachers. I didn't like him. It was there, and what's more, there was more. This also resulted in the fact that you couldn't record things. I mean, of course, VCRs did come online. They were probably around from the late 70s onwards, but we never had a video cassette recorder in our house until with my parents, probably till the mid 80s. So everything had to be live. I remember distinctly there was a TV room at my first school in Oxford. And we used to go and sit there in front of the chairs, and there was just the big CRT TV on a stand, and there would be later on there was like a VCR underneath it. But to begin with, we used to have to go there at the right time. Sometimes we'd be a few minutes late, and the program would have already started. And the teacher used to switch it on and fiddle with the channels. No remote control. We actually pressed a button on the box. As I said, there was like a CRT TV, a big massive thing, thick, with a big superstructure at the back, and it used to hum, and it used to get like static electricity off the screen that made your hair on your arms stand up. Oh yeah, and it used to be warm. The TV was warm to touch. Yeah, I don't know how many of you remember those things. How many of my viewers are actually that generation? I don't know. Some of you are, I know. And because you couldn't record things, people of the haunted generation have memories of things they've seen on TV, sometimes very disturbing things. Like you say, you'd sometimes end up watching inappropriate content because you'd end up watching what your parents wanted to watch. unless they were very strict and put you to bed before the watershed at 9, you'd end up watching stuff with them. I saw a lot of things on TV that I really shouldn't have. I mentioned in, one of my Hospital Porter Reacts videos, I mentioned Orca the Killer Whale, a film which absolutely just really messed me up. It really did. It actually just, I wasn't right for, I don't think I was right ever again after watching that. So you often see things. I mean, a lot of people of my generation, the haunted generation, have memories of disturbing things they've seen on TV, but don't remember how, where it was, when it was. I managed to track some of them down on YouTube simply by describing them. But one thing I do remember very well as a child, I watched something. It was a film, TV, I don't know what it was, or a parachute jumper jumps out of a plane, falling. And then suddenly they start glowing. Their body becomes a glowing ball of light, and he changes shape. He metamorphoses as he's falling. And he's in free fall, not with the parachute open. And there was some weird music in the background, and that was creepy. And there was the thing about the haunted generation. There was an awareness. There was an awareness of the supernatural and the paranormal that you don't get on TV today, where it's, well, at least certainly in terms of ufology, I think in the post-2017 world we've gone back to that acceptance. But UFO reports in, before 1980 on TV were very similar to the ones post-2017. They were taken they were done in a very sober tone. It was very kind of like, this is a real thing, we've got to deal with it. And the same went for other forms of the paranormal. For example, ghosts. Nationwide, a TV program called Nationwide, which was like a news and current affairs show, did a whole segment on the Enfield poltergeist. And you actually see Janet, that voice coming out of Janet's throat in the background, And it was done seriously. At least there was an awareness of the supernatural and paranormal that you don't get nowadays. And I talked about this. I'd mentioned the adaptation of Dave the Triffids. Dave the Triffids is a 1950s novel by John Wyndham, but it was made into a very good TV adaptation. Again, it's on YouTube. A lot of these things are on YouTube. In the early 80s, yeah. And there was Arthur C. Clarke, but I'll come to that later because I think there's going to be a segment of Arthur C. Clarke this morning, in the second day too. So I think time for breakfast, I think, and then we're going to head off to day 2 of this particular conference.
That's a fine morning here in Warrington. I'm just left the hotel behind me, and I'm heading for the venue. I didn't realise there was actually a proper walkway here. I didn't have to walk along the verge like I did on Friday night. Friday night, bloody hell, seems so long ago. This conference has gone very slow. It's different to most conferences. But it's a sunny, cold but sunny morning here in Warrington. And the doors open 9:30, which means I'll probably get there a little bit early and get a chance to shoot the shit with a few people, which should be good. Yeah. Oh, had another lovely breakfast. I'll tell you what, the breakfasts here are really nice. I mean, it's worth doing. £9.50. Eat as much as you like. Of course, there's only so much you can eat. That's the problem. But again, no lunch for me today. I'm a bit worried about my friends. They haven't texted back. I sent them a text last night. My friends from Wales who were here. We went to the No Crusader Guilt here pub, and they had to drive all the way back to South Wales where they live, and they haven't texted. I texted them late last night saying, I hope you got home all right. No answer. I've texted them again saying, hope you slept well. I mean, maybe they're just tired, But I tend to worry about people, and I've now got no credit left, so I've got to go and buy some credit from somewhere. But at least when I top my phone up this time, I'll get sent 70 gigabytes free access when I don't get Wi-Fi. So yes. Not that I use that kind of stuff much, anyway. I am with the haunted generation. I'm not mobile phone obsessed. Well, some people from the haunted generation are like, they embrace all modern technology. So coming back to that haunted generation thing again, it's like really quite amazing, you know. It's just really struck a chord with me. I was telling you about the thing about the parachutist falling, jumping out of a plane and then glowing and mutating in midair, very spooky music or sounds in the background. And as I said, you can't necessarily identify these memories. The memories are there, they're in our heads, but you can't identify them. You don't have a search record on a TV set, you don't have a browsing history on an analog 70s CRT box. You don't, as I said, until we didn't get a VCR until like I was in middle school, which means you couldn't record anything. Memory is very important in those days, maybe more so than for kids today. You know, I suppose human memory needs to be used to work. It has to be continually exercised like a muscle. And I heard a story, you know, that there are scribes in India who can remember all the Vedas. The Vedas of ancient India, so they're probably the oldest stories in history. They were thought to be composed millennia before they were ever written down. People just remembered them. It could be that part of this transhumanism thing that the Illuminati are trying to do to us would include dissolution of our memory abilities. I don't know. I may be the last generation of people who have full memory ability. Certainly, my daughter doesn't remember things as well as I do. Although during her formative years, I was not as red-pilled as I am now. And had I been, I would have brought her up very differently. I think I'd homeschooled her and things like that. I wouldn't have had her V-worded and things like that. She did have the MMRV word, which I wouldn't have given her. I wouldn't have allowed her to have if I'd known back then what I know now. But you know, you do the best with the knowledge you have. It's just, I suppose, on the positive side, you know, with all this haunting stuff, all this fears of the future, there's hopes of the future, the optimism and the pessimism with which we look to the future in the 70s. I saw this Marcus Allen, you know, who's from an older generation. You know, he was already adult in the 60s. He talks about this too. The terrible. It's both fear and it's hope. It's like the alien, when they meet the alien in Contact. There's the film Contact, very good Robert Zemeckis film with Jodie Foster. The alien says, you know, you're an interesting species. You're capable of such beautiful dreams and such terrible nightmares. Yeah, it's true. We all thought we were going to get flying cars. And these were all predicted before the year 2000. Instead, we got Fiat Allegros and things like that. So cold. These cars like this. Oh, Morgoth was saying actually, you know, that the cars of today are like so different. I mean, look at the cars of the 1950s. These are the big muscle cars. They were built for power. They were built for looks. They were very big. They were huge by today's standards. Huge, powerful cars. They weren't necessarily faster, but they were bigger. In the days when petrol cost 20p a barrel, they were like, you could make big 2.5 litre engines. Now, cars today are built for economy, and Morgoth was saying, you know, the reason people feel so affectionate about the old type cars, the Chryslers and the Plymouths, and especially those American ones, those American muscle cars from Motown, you know, the big Detroit motor industry is because they had personality. There was something happy and adventurous, and they were still very masculine about them. Today cars are built for safety, for economy, for practicality, very practical. They're more sort of practical rather than idealistic. They're much more feminine. Morgoth Review did a very, very good video about modern cars. And again, this is something that was not predicted by the haunted generation or the adults around them at the time. Oh yeah, this is a lovely walk actually. Oh well, speaking of, there are some like Harley Davidsons and things, motorbikes. One of them. There's a lot of motorbike fans among the Fortean group. You know, Fortean people tend to be very keen on there's a lot of motorbike fans, a lot of heavy metal fans, gothics people. My friends from Wales are very gothic. The ones I went to the No Crusader Guilt pub. So I wonder what's happening today. I've got my itinerary. I know the first speaker was about Arthur C. Clarke. I'm curious to see what they have to say about old ACC, because he was another nonce. He actually confessed before he died and said he regularly used rent boys in Sri Lanka where he lived. These are really impoverished children who, you know, they do know you know what for anything, you know, any kind of money you could give them. But I went through a phase where I couldn't read enough of his stuff. Like from my late teens onwards, from late teens to early 20s, I was obsessed with his literature. I read all the Arthur C. Clarke books I could. Great science fiction author. 2001: Space Odyssey. There's all the others as well. He did some great sci-fi. And then Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World. Yeah, I'll say more about that in my review of the talk, because I think that's where the talk's going to go. But that would have been post-70s. I can't remember exactly when a Mysterious World came out, but you must have seen it. It had like the Mitchell Hedges crystal skull was like the logo of the series, and it was like a really massive, wonderful thing. It's really, I must have had an interest in woo-woo stuff from a very young age. So even then, I mean, I wouldn't have, you know, I didn't know I was going to go on to do Hapanwo or anything, but I did know I must have had an interest. And it was mainstream, see, these things were mainstream. There was none of the, that's lovely, isn't it? There was none of the taboo and fringe and ridicule and nature of the stuff you get today. Times have changed, haven't they? I'll say more about that probably after the talk. Right now I've got to get my ass to the venue. It's a nice brisk hour-long walk. It's actually quite nice to get some exercising in a conference area, because I'm used to getting plenty of exercise. And conferences, during the conference weekends I generally don't probe and places like that, and I tend to feel it. By the Monday morning I tend to feel it. Even a couple of days without exercise does play on me a little bit. Anyway, I'm going to shut up now and just enjoy myself in silence as I walk along here. Look, I'll come a little bit further along this little road here, not far now. Funny thing, there's like an aeroplane here, which is sitting in the middle of a field. Just sort of like there. There's a little sort of like single-seated light aircraft, just sitting in the middle of this garden or field. We're not going to go anywhere. There's no runway. I wonder what it's doing there. It could be the aliens left it there. Or maybe it's got an anti-gravity thing in it, so it just rises up and... See what I mean about conference fever? But what other conferences are coming? Well, I should give you a preview of upcoming events, I think. A good idea. Well, I'm going to Wales to see my Welsh friends, the ones who I've been texting. Sometime in the next couple of weeks, gonna do some interesting things there. I've got some plans. I wouldn't say too much right now. I want it to be a surprise for you. Be a nice surprise. Got a lot of security where that plane is. Keep the people away from the aliens and the anti-gravity stuff, obviously. Stop it, Ben, stop it. But there's yeah, I've got some interesting plans when I go to see my Welsh friends, who were here this weekend. Gone home now, which I'll cover at the time. There's also Probe is coming back. Yay, Probe! The Probe conference. Oh, the Probe. You know how I feel about Probe. It was my first conference, the first and fairest of them all. October 2006. I went, oh God, I was hooked. I was hooked from the moment I got there. So the Probe conference is returning, and it's been organised by Paul, the son of Sam. Sam died, sadly. I think I mentioned this on our live stream. I certainly put up a tribute to him on Hapanwo Voice. He died a couple of weeks ago. He's now back with Jean. So Sam is gone, but Paul, his son, is carrying on the tradition. And he's resurrecting Probe, and there's going to be a special memorial tribute conference to his mum and dad in the last weekend of May. So I hardly need to tell you I'm going to go to it. I mean, you know I'm going to go there, don't you? You know I'm going there. Yes, I am. Can't wait. There's also a Basis Project conference I'm going to in July. It's actually the early July. Now, I'm actually speaking, not there, I'm speaking at an event in Dorset, the Dorset Earth Mysteries group, literally the day before. So that's going to be an interesting journey for me. I just go to Dorset and go to Devizes. Haven't bought my ticket for that yet. Don't know, obviously not the speaking one. I haven't bought my ticket yet for the Basis Project conference. There's also, I'm going to I forgot what it's called now. I think it's the people who did Awakening Manchester, like the Zohar group and the Ozark Mountain people. They're doing that conference again, or something similar in Blackpool. It's going to be the Ancient Alien special. Eric von Daniken's going to be there. Georgia Sukalos, several other people. Richard Doty. Oh, Rick Doty he's doing the circuit now. Rick Doty. I never suggest banning people or anything like that, or censoring them, but for goodness sake, if he makes you an offer, say no. That bloke is not to be trusted, in my view. I've never met him. I hear he's a nice guy. If I met him, I'd be civil to him, but if he says, Ben, listen, all you got to do is trust me. Okay, you work for me and I'll make you the disclosure guy. And yeah, but you've got to do this and that for me. No, don't. Just look up Paul Benowitz and then that scandal. Doty was instrumental in that. And I've ranted about that before. I'm not going to go through it again now. That's coming up as well. What's happening? Something else happening in August. I can't remember. I'm literally going to go to as many of these conferences as time and money allows. If you want to book me to speak, if you're organising a conference, I'll do a great talk for you on any particular subject. I can talk about loads of different subjects, and I'm completely free. I don't charge. Just give me a place to stay for the night. Help me out with my coach fare. That's all I ask. There's a conference I want to go to. This is weird because this goes back into ancient history now. But the Outer Limits magazine conference, a couple of years before the lockdown, I actually wanted to go to. And I applied to go there. And it looked good because, there's some interesting speakers there. You get to meet people. It's in Hull. Hull is a good sort of exopolitical UFO paracon community. So I wanted to go. And I was informed, I've talked about this before, I was informed by the organiser that I would not be welcome. I was asked not to attend. Reason being, it's nothing personal, Ben. It's just good order would not be maintained with you there because there was a lot of people there who don't like me. But of course, I thought everything would be alright, you see, because at RawCon, if you remember, I was at this conference and I was speaking and everything went fine, and I was speaking and there were a lot of people there. Alison Dunlop was there, who's one of these people who can't stand me. in Alison's case, I mean, she allied herself with Sasha Christie and Peter Robbins against Larry Warren. The real reason she doesn't like me is because I'm against this women in ufology thing. She's very pro injecting feminism into our community, and I'm very much against that. That's the real reason she doesn't like me. But we were both there. We were both speaking. And we just stayed out of each other's way, and there was no trouble. I think Chris Evers, the OLM organiser, I think he was at the back. I think he was waiting for me to start shouting and throwing chairs around, and I didn't. And I thought that would be a vindication. So I'm having a go at something personal now. I might edit this out, I don't know, but I thought that would be the end of it. I thought, that's it. Everything's going to be fine now, because he knows that good order would be maintained with me present. Alison didn't kick up, I didn't kick up. We just stayed out of each other's way, and we got on with the conference. Now, so when I've realised that there was another OLM conference, I did ask in one of my videos, am I still banned? Chris sent me like but yeah, it turned out I thought, well, I'm not banned, because he sent me the bloody prospectus for the conference. Just sent it me by inbox. I thought, good. So I thought I would, but then when I wrote off to get a ticket, couldn't get one. What happened? I sent off three times. I wrote asking, because he said you got to write in and they'll send you like an invoice. So I sent 3 times. I wrote in. It's unusual actually that tickets are sold that way. It's an unusual way to sell tickets. I can't wonder if maybe he brought the system in order to keep certain people away. But anyway, I received no reply, so I assume I'm still banned. If so, okay. If I'm banned, I'm banned. But you know, I know his reasons that he thinks he needs to ban me, despite the fact that at Outer Limits magazine there was no problem. But I just wish he had the decency just to tell me. Does anyone on that team of the organisers have the decency? Instead of me keeping on applying for invoices, I've done it 3 times now. Why don't they just write back and say, sorry Ben, you can't come, and this is why? Does anyone in that team have enough respect for me simply to do that? I feel better that way. It'll be. I feel I was being treated with more respect if they did that, and they haven't. So there you go. That's one conference I can't go to. Never mind. I'll spend the money on something else and the time on something else, no doubt. It'll be productive. So, what else is there? I don't think there's actually any. I think that's it for now. No doubt others will be added to the list. I'll hopefully be invited to speak at other places. You know, it'd be great for you guys to come along too. And I'll do reportages of my events whenever I can, like I'm doing for this one. Ah, look. Nearly there. It seems a long way. I've got to get myself some more phone credit from somewhere. I've used it all up, can't believe it. Yeah. Look at that, that's lovely, isn't it? I see there's some chemtrails appearing. That's alright, it's a big long thick one there. Not to worry. I'm nearly there now. Looking forward to day 2. Here you see, there's a bus stop here called Eagle and Child, indicating that somewhere around here there is a pub called Eagle and Child. Maybe there used to be. Or maybe it's over there somewhere. Maybe you can see it right now and I can't. But of course there's a very famous, there's a very nice pub and a very famous pub in Oxford called the Eagle and Child. Home of the Inklings, famous writer circle, which included J.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. It's known as the Bird and Baby. Maybe it's a pub that used to be here and has gone, which is a shame. Too many pubs, that happens to too many pubs. Someone put a really good comment actually on my Nothing Works Anymore video a couple of weeks ago. So I covered in the reply to comments video. Here's the Red Lion. Brennan Low. So that means, that's Welsh, but it means the Lion King. A Selkoch is a lion. I think it's a Selkoch or Goch. It's nice to see this place in daylight, isn't it? Yeah. I can't find that pub though. It's not the Eagle and Child. But it's interesting that they have pubs here with just very ordinary names, I suppose. The Black Swan, the Red Lion, the Eagle and Child. It's kind of sort of typical English pub names. I'll take you through the stalls now, and there's so much to buy. I might end up buying one of these. There's lots of Lee Lincoln ones. I've not read that one. New Jerusalem, Adrian Gilbert's. These are just really, really good things. The Loch Ness Mystery solved? Yeah, likely. I bet. This is pretty old, you can tell. Oh, it's got a barcode. When was this written then? It's really old. 1984. Solved my posterior. Heaven's Mirror. Graham Hancock, something like that. Yeah. Nice. This is pretty good. It looks like a mystery. It's just up my street, isn't it? Come over here. And you have like these sort of like adult comic books here. So Boat's Progress. Yeah. Something for the mature reader. 40 and Funnies. Nice one. And this is the Lapis stall over here. Look at these. Aren't they cute? There's little doggies with the Jenny Randalls DVD. I've got a copy of that DVD, by the way. It's good. Even though I was in the audience at the time. I'm looking forward to the conference in October. Needless to say, there will be a Herb Hanwo TV reportage. Interesting list of speakers there. So that's one to look forward to. I didn't mention that earlier, actually. October, the Lapis conference. Okay, the first speakers. I say speaker. He was a singer. One thing else. He's quite something. He had a talk called "Surviving Arthur C. Clarke," and I did ask him in the Q&A what he meant by surviving, and the word surviving. Again, it comes back to this haunted generation thing. Is that some of the things on that programme were distressing for young children. Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World, an absolutely seminal series for anyone who's in any way into woo-woo. Indeed, I myself was a big fan of the show as a child. This would have been the early 80s. I won't tell you how old I was, but I was pretty young. And it wasn't like, this was not like a prime time show. I remember it was mid-morning Sunday when the religious people would be in church, and anyone not religious would be watching Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World. If you were a kid and you went to church, unfortunately, you didn't get to see it, because if your parents dragged you to church, again, you couldn't record things in those days. But sometimes there'd be repeats on other days. Repeats was the nearest thing you got to records in those days. But Arthur C. Clarke, great, brilliant science fiction writer, filthy pervert, but both of those things, produced this entire series about mysterious phenomena, in which he played. This was really odd, because even though he clearly had an interest, he was very much a skeptic. He wasn't like a 100% skeptic. He took UFOs seriously. In fact, these come up in his fiction sometimes, but generally he always played the skeptic line. That was the first awareness I had of skeptics as a thing came from that series, because I used to say, always a bit of a spoiled sport, I used to think. You come along with these amazing stories that people have to tell you, and he comes and tells you how they're not really strange. And that's my first inkling of the concept of a skeptic in those days. But Clarke's fiction, like I said, I was very drawn to it in my late teens, has this sort of element, has this slightly mystical element to it, actually. It's probably more common in modern science fiction than it was in the science fiction of his era. He generally wrote through from the 1950s to the 1970s, was his main, his peak period, I think, was from the sort of mid-50s to the mid-70s. He's famous for his novels, of course, and the the collaboration he did with Stanley Kubrick is probably his most famous work. But he's a real ace when it comes to short stories. He's one of the greatest short story writers I've ever known. That is science fiction and non-sci-fi short story writers. The first ever short story anthology I got of his, and I think I prefer his short stories even better than his novels, was called The 9 Billion Names... the anthology was called The Other Side of the Sky. And the showcase story was an adaptation from a newspaper serial he did in the 50s about people building space stations and things like that. But the first story in this anthology is called The 9 Billion Names of God, and it refers to a project that a group of Buddhist monks have in the Himalayas to create every combination for the name of God out of their whatever number of numbers of symbols there are in the Tibetan script, and they bring in a computer scientist to help them create all these 9 billion names and write them all down. And they're very worried because, you see, the monks have this belief that once they've done that, the universe will cease to exist because the purpose of it will have been fulfilled. And so I'm going to give you a spoiler here, it's all right. But this was the first short story I ever read of Arthur C. Clarke. And it's not really a science fiction story. It's more a kind of Twilight Zone spooky story. And then what happens is the computer, of course, is brought in and finishes the job, and the engineers working on the computer are very worried in this monastery because they think the monk, when the world doesn't end, the monks will go crazy and they'll start smashing things up and killing people. And so they decide to do a runner before the computer finishes its program. The problem is when the computer finishes its program, they look up and there's that classic line, one by one, without any fuss, the stars were going out. I'll never forget that. Anyway, this program covered an awful lot of mysterious phenomena of all kinds. It was I never forget the titles, but the Mitchell Hedges Crystal Skull as the titles on a rotating plate. Ryan Sherlow, the speaker, he says that's been debunked. I don't think it is, because Nexus magazine did a thing about it. I don't think it's been debunked at all. And from what I gather, that's a big subject. He reckons it's been debunked. I heard it hadn't, because Nexus did a series of articles just a couple of years ago about it. Then he said Alan Hawkshaw was the guy who created the mysterious score. I remember the musical score. He also created other the scores of other TV programs, including Prisoner Cell Block H, actually. And in fact, the Arthur C. Clarke score actually appears in Prisoner Cell Block H a couple of times. Bit of curiosity there. Gordon Honeycomb was the narrator, a posh English guy, and he did say, we've got onto the woke stuff already now. Apparently there was a minor reference to this in Steve Jones's talk, which I didn't see, but he said, oh well, the thing about Arthur C. Clarke was it was very male. No doubt he meant white male. It was usually men talking to other men, and in this 21st century we need to take that into account. He said, well, you know what I think of the whole woke stuff, but of course inevitably this woke stuff is going to get into here. But he talked about, it covered all kinds of mysteries, and there was a book that accompanied it. The Antikythera mechanism, I mentioned that. A mechanical computer from 2,000 plus years ago. That's still a mystery. The Baghdad battery, I didn't know this, the Baghdad battery's gone, it's vanished. And it disappeared, strangely enough, in the 2003 invasion. Like so many other things that were taken from the Iraqi museum, supposedly by art thieves. The Baghdad battery's now vanished into the world of black market antiques. Apparently there's a guy called Spinelli who did psychic experiments on first year children at school. You couldn't do that nowadays, could you? And this guy Ryan actually said you couldn't do that nowadays. However, Susan Blackmore said she remembered she did something like that too. Susan Blackmore did. She said that when she was doing her psychical studies, she was in psychical research before she became a skeptic. She herself did research on children. There's all kinds of other things. The Cottingley Fairies, that was actually a fake case, a very obvious fake case, by two girls in 1915 using a camera. They faked some photos of fairies. They said there were real fairies in their garden, but they created fake photos to draw people's attention, to get people interested in the real fairies, which is a very bad way of doing it if that's the case. Oh, there's so much more. I'll maybe talk more about it later, because I think Anne Winsper's on in a minute. But there is actually a 90s equivalent of Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World. It's much more light-hearted, equally stylish in its own way, and that is 40 and TV with Father Lionel Fanthorpe. I don't know how many of you, probably younger people than me, will remember that. I'm just going to go into the auditorium now. Okay. You're right. I expect younger people than me will remember it. But that was, it was. I actually interviewed Lionel. So he was actually on Hapanmo Radio as an interview. I'm just going to show you the stalls again now.
EWI, electronic wind instrument made by Yamaha. You know the sort of thing I mean?
Oh my God! Look at that. The album about the Broadhaven Triangle. I've actually been reading a book about that.
Which?
It's called the Dove-Head Enigma.
Yep.
Yeah.
I mentioned that in the.
Oh, cool. My friends from Wales, they bought me. I've been talking about on this video. They told me about that. Oh yeah.
There's
How much you
I put further reading in there, so that's one of the books.
Thanks, yeah. I'm going there in a few. There we are. The Dove-Head Enigma.
I lived down that neck of the woods myself. See.
I come from Lampeter.
Oh really?
Yeah, but I was much too young to know anything about this.
Well, this happened when I lived down there, and that was my sister who was here a few years ago. She's passed away now.
Right.
And she used to come along here with me. And when Steve Mary was giving his talk, I don't know if you've been previous years, no? Have you been before?
Up to here, yeah.
Yeah. Do you remember Steve Mary giving a big talk, and he talked about Broadhaven and
I wasn't at that one, no.
I know. That's when she put her hand up and said, I saw a UFO back in 1977.
Oh, right.
And that's what caused people to be called.
I had some friends with me. It's a shame they've gone. They couldn't come yesterday. I've got some friends who live in the area. They're the ones who gave me the book. And they know all about it. It's a shame they're not here. I'll tell them about you. I'll tell them about this.
So this guy will take a card.
Will do. Thanks very much. I'll give that to them. Yeah, thank you. Spurious Transient. I'll remember that. Now, as I was saying, I'm just back in the auditorium now, just waiting for the next speaker. Several of the cases that I remember. Now, you can watch these, all of them. Both series, the original Mysterious World and Strange Powers, are on YouTube. And there's several copies of them. Certain particular cases, the Flixborough prediction. Now there was an explosion, I think it was in 1978 at the Flixborough chemical plant, and somebody remembered very, very clearly seeing a news report of this event, and what's more, but they saw it about 5 hours before it happened. That could be a Mandela effect, it could be something psychic, it could be a mistake. Of course, the skeptics will say it's just misremembering, but I thought that was very interesting when I saw it. Usually there'd be like a cliffhanger, they'd say it was 5 hours early, then it would cut to the mysterious, then it would cut to end credits, you know. And there was the hazelnuts that fell from the sky, that was good. Images that appeared on film, things like that. The term Fortean comes from Charles Fort. It was an American guy who, well over 100 years ago now, kind of invented modern paranormal investigation, the concept of modern paranormal investigation. Wrote several books about it, inspired people like Arthur C. Clarke and others to do what they did. And where Clarke's interest comes from, I'm not entirely sure, because Clarke was a scientist, he was an engineer. He was very much a skeptic, but he wasn't a skeptic in the sense he wasn't part of the... He didn't seem to be motivated by the thing that motivates most skeptics. It was almost like a curiosity thing for him. Almost like... And it didn't really... Because he just sort of made these programs. Most of the things he didn't believe in. He just was looking for like explanations for them, and he'd say things like... when someone saw a ghost, he would say, well, you know the eye can act like a camera, you know the eye acts like a camera, maybe it can act like a projector too. Things like that. He'd just say very simple, I think quite simplistic rationalisations, for, if that's the right word, for the things that were discovered or were talked about. I do wonder actually where that interest came from. I wonder what was his point, really. However, you know, it was such a good series, and like I said, it's not only, it's something you can enjoy now and you can watch now, and it's very, very good. Yes, it's very white and male, which is a reason to like it more, I think, in my view. But it is dated in that sense. But like I said, dated things are often good. I mean, there was when it comes to like 4T and TV, and that was in the 90s. I remember that well. I enjoyed that too. And I interviewed Lionel Fanthorpe for Paranormal Radio. That to me was the last, I think, of decent coverage of 4T and material on mainstream media. After that, it just went into the giggle corner, and it's been there ever since. UFOs have now, since 2017, UFOs have emerged from the giggle corner, but so far the other things haven't. And maybe one day they will. I hope they do. Anyway, Anne Winsper on next. I'm going to get myself a cup of tea. Now this is an interesting book here, Visit Kids, The Curious Enigma of Imaginary Childhood Friends by Mike Halliwell. It's I've talked about this several times on this channel about children and imaginary friends, but this, I mean, it's a big subject. I won't go into it now.
It's a big subject. Now, the interesting thing, to summarise what Mike Halliwell does, he goes through most of the common trotted out explanations for kids having invisible friends, and debunks all of them. They're not excessively lonely, they're not disturbed children, they're perfectly normal, etc., etc. Now, let's get going.
Okay, but that's quite a rare book, isn't it?
It's a rare book, but it will be reprinted by the Centre for Fortean Zoology Press sometime late this year. That's late 2022, early 2023.
Right.
So if you've got a copy of it that you want to monetize on eBay, get it out there now, because it's going to get reprinted.
Exactly. Good. Thanks, Dan. Yeah, the price is like in 3 figures if you want to buy a copy of it now. But it will be. The CFZ are going to bring out a new edition. They've got the rights for it from Mike, so I look forward to that enormously, because, well, I could talk about that an awful lot, and it's a big subject. But yeah, it's a fascinating subject with children and imaginary friends. Yeah. Thanks, Dan. Okay. At a pint. I can't remember if I said it earlier, but I'm not going to do full reviews of Anne Winsper and the other speakers just yet, because the battery's now far full. This camera's battery doesn't last as long as it used to. And I want to save plenty of... I want to try and film the lard contest, so I want to make sure I've got plenty of battery space for that. So I'll do the reviews later. Just sitting in the auditorium waiting for the next segment to start, and I just kind of noticing this book here that Jamie's bought. It looks very interesting. The Golden Bough, A Study of Magic and Religion, by Sir James Fraser. This volume was the author's published in 1992, abridged. It's originally appeared in 12 volumes. It's a huge, an old book. It's really there's a lot in there. That's kind of the Atlas Shrugged of occult and mystical literature. Yeah. There's quite a lot there. So I saw that actually earlier on Glenn's stall, so I'm glad he's picked it up. I hope he enjoys it. I'll ask him about it actually when I see him.
You can lick at it. Right, where's Jackie?
It's just us two again. Nathan's going to do it.
Hang on. I'm just waiting on Jackie.
Working all right?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Well, Nathan was going to do it.
We're just waiting on Jackie to film this. Quite a while. This is going to be about a 5-minute job. Has anyone seen Jackie? Where's she gone? I'll just go and try and find her. She's supposed to be filming it. listen to my story like some medieval bard of the wonderful tradition called the eating of the lard. Oh, the eating of the lard, we boys, the eating of the lard. The pig fat will be guzzled at the eating of the lard. We have two brave contestants, the same ones from last year, our reigning champion Ben, and our brave challenger and runner-up for last year, also called Ben, Ben's Love Lad. Right, gentlemen, eat the lard.
Just us two again.
It looks like it's just used. The leftovers will be thrown out to the birds, they won't be wasted. Or either that or they'll be used to use on Quite possibly. Right, so you've got 5 minutes.
Starting now.
What warriors? You wouldn't get this at any other 14 or paranormal contest. You would not get this. They never did this at the 14 times of convention. ASAP, Lapis, take note. This is what they want. This is what they want. This is what they want. Stop being big facts. This is what they want. If anybody has to drop out, just let me know. There's no shame. There's no shame. Other paranormal conferences, they have seances. We have Lardy.
Oh, go on, Ben. You can do it.
What does it taste of?
Lard. Go on, you can do it.
Come on, got more.
You're a vegetarian, Jackie. Why don't you try it? Have a go. Right, I think we might be coming to the end. It's been about 5 minutes, hasn't it? Around about 5 minutes.
Sudden death.
You what? Have we got a what?
A jam tart wall.
A jam tart one? No, I'll stuff all them. Sorry, mate?
Oh, easily.
I'm going to Steve, you've had our 5 minutes. Let me have a look at the lard and see who's eating the most lard. Stick your box down. Oh my goodness me. That's very hard. But I think Ben has our challenger has just shaded it.
Oh wow! Well done. What's it more lad?
There are 2 prizes. Prize number 1. Now, do you remember those old fighting fantasy game books of the 80s where you choose your own adventure? And you have to make decisions and turn to another page and then make another decision. Right, here's one, and it's called The Ocean of Lard. And you play a criminal on the the run from the police who discovers an ocean of lard that's not on any map, and apparently it's in Wyoming, and you have to join one of 2 pirate ships that sail on the ocean of lard and choose your own lard-based adventure. And then, not only that, we have, from the pages of Viz magazine, the t-shirt. They're happy because they eat lard. Isn't that the truth? Well done, Ben.
Thank you.
Well done, Ben. The reigning champion. Hands over to the new champion. Both mighty warriors, I'm sure you'll agree.
Oh yeah, I can't wait.
Right then, I'm going to put this afternoon.
Oh, how do you feel after your lard winning exploits?
I don't think I'll have any dinner tonight. Thanks, Jamie, for being cameraman
Yeah,
for
rather well
Hamburg
done.
TV. I'm going to wash my hands before I pick these things up.
Yeah, let's have a look at what he's won. He's won a nice book called The Ocean of Lard. And a nice t-shirt saying they're very happy because they eat lard.
For being cameraman at this particular little scene you've just seen. I feel alright actually, it's not too bad. You've got to remember about lard, it is natural fat. If you've got to eat fat, it's probably the best fat to eat. It's as opposed to sort of plastic trans fats, this is actually natural fat, which is healthy. So it probably won't kill me, at least too late now anyway. But I don't feel too bad actually now, I feel alright. Yeah, it may bounce back on me later. Alright at the moment, alright. It may bounce back later. But I've got some wonderful prizes which I'll show you later. You've seen them a little bit. The book is not what it looks like, I'll tell you. You'll see what I mean when I show it to you. Got a quiz, and the picture. Dan, what's that? This is a pair of women's skimpy knickers, and it says "Good one, Roger," and it's got Richard on there. Oh my god! Oh my god! Ben's put. I'm not wearing. He's put it on his face. Oh my god!
Can I get out?
What did the runners up get? What did you guys get?
Oh, we got some very grim.
Oh, Grimm's Nightmares. Oh my god!
Give me a minute. I found one. I'm trying to find a werewolf.
Oh my god, this is like an adult colouring book.
Literally. Look, you even get a nice little werewolf in there.
Oh, that's your werewolf.
Look at this.
That's good,
Look
isn't
at
it?
this.
Oh my god, is that an evil mouse?
Evil, well, it's either evil mouse or a rat. I guess.
Oh my god.
Hey, you've got Hansel and
I like the idea of the beauty of mouse.
Hansel and Gretel going on. The witch.
Oh, that's scary.
There was a better one of it. That was just on, yeah. Definitely Hansel and Gretel list.
That looks scary.
Yeah, I think it's grim that fairy tales.
Oh, yeah. Oh my goodness, mate. I don't know which is. I think we might have got the actual better prize than the. Yeah. The winner's got something worse than you, I think. Yeah. Richard is now immortalised on women's underwear. Richard, how's it feel to be immortalised on women's underwear?
It's fantastic. I'd like to get into women's underwear much more often.
Oh, I do as well, but I don't like my face on there. You know, I won't be too graphic, but I prefer, you know.
It's feet
absence.
for me.
All right.
The thing about feet, bare feet, women's feet. Yes, please.
Right, you are. Are you listening, viewers? Any women, take your shoes off. No, we're having dinner now. I've had a nice meal. Very, very big meal. It filled me up. Do you like that? We don't have an open fire here. We've got like a TV version of it, which is kind of psychological. A psychological open fire. It's quite something. Well, I'm back at the hotel room now. After I was going to walk home, but then the other Ben, the kilted Ben, the guy I beat in the lard eating contest, he kind of gave me a lift back. So again, I didn't have to walk back. So I'm back here in the hotel room. And it's about 9:30, something like that. It's not that late, but I just feel tired. And the bar was shut, so things are sort of winding down in the bar. I think everyone's tired and they're going to go to bed. I'm just I didn't have time to do all the reviews of the speeches, of the talks. I stopped at Ryan Sherlow, and that's because other things were going on, then. But Anne Winsper, who I've seen before, was interesting. She's spoken before at Lapis, if you remember. She talked about something that was touched on earlier by several people, including the first speaker, the guy who talked about, what's his name? Mark Newbrook. No. I'm getting what's it? Bob. No, who is it? It was Ryan Sherlow. Sorry, it was touched on by Ryan Sherlow, who's the first speaker of the day. I really have fallen behind, haven't I, with my reviews? Which is Stigmata, and she was dealing. What Dr. Winsper was dealing with was a mystery of the church. And there's lots of mysteries associated with the church. You don't have to be a religious person to wonder about these things. The Turin Shroud, things like that. I'm very interested in that sort of thing. But she referred to stigmata. Stigmata is where wounds appear on someone's body, which are associated with the popular image of the wounds of Jesus Christ on the cross. Not accurate historically, because when people were crucified, they weren't crucified by putting nails through the hands, which is how it's often depicted in religious iconography, but through the forearms. And so you've got to answer. It's obvious that these people who are stigmatics, whatever has caused their particular condition, whether it be something psychosomatic or a tulpa manifestation, or indeed divine intervention by God, is the result of the person experiencing stigmata being is perceiving this Christian iconography. Stained glass window showing Jesus, statues of him, crucifixes, things like that. And one very, very famous stigmatic was someone called Teresa Helena Higginson. Now there's a campaign to make her a saint. She was born in a sacred place, actually, Holywell in North Wales, and she was born in the late 19th century. Her parents were devout. Were religious, and they went to this place where there's these healing waters in North Wales. Holywell is actually a place where today it's considered, some people have claimed it's the resting place of the Holy Grail. A very, very sacred site. Of course, like many of these sacred sites, its sacredness goes back long before Christianity, and to pagan times, to Iron Age Celtic mythology, things like that. And she was a stigmatic, but she also practiced mortification. Mortification is where a very religious person, will deliberately self-harm. And of course, today, probably it wouldn't be allowed, especially because she was quite young when she started doing this. She was a teenager when she started doing this. She would scourge herself, beat herself with something like, you see in the Da Vinci Code, the guy who keeps whipping himself and putting the chains, cutting his own skin, things like that. She used to put, pins and needles in a mattress and lie on top of that when she sleep on this, where these pins and needles were sticking into her. Things like that. It didn't help that she was abused by priests. They would beat her as well. Of course, the church is notorious for that, isn't it? And it just does beg the question, when it comes to stigmata, how do you separate the stigmata from the mortification? Medical examination of stigmatics has shown that there appears to be no injury that causes wounds to come out, causes bleeding from various places, including the hands, and also from the side, because Jesus was pierced in the abdomen by the spear of destiny, and that's what the Nazis were trying to get hold of during the war. And people sometimes have a cut on their abdomen, on their side of their body, which blood comes out, and it appears sometimes there's fake stigmatics who do harm themselves, who cut themselves deliberately in the places where stigmatics bleed from. But genuine stigmatics, people like Padre Pio, St. Francis of Assisi was an early one. That was in the 13th century. That was never examined medically, but there appears to be no injury. What you have instead is you have a strange. It's almost as if the blood somehow comes out through the sweat glands. There's no medical condition that could produce that. It's very, very strong. It's an odd thing. Apparently, Saint Francis, he died from blood loss. Yeah. Another weird thing about Teresa Helena Higginson, she made predictions, and one of those was she was actually lecturing, and in this, she was lecturing and teaching. She was teaching the liturgy. And she made predictions. She said, well, in a couple of decades' time, there's going to be a terrible war. It'll be fought partly by machines that are under the sea and in the air. And people thought, you're crazy. There's nothing. There's no machines that can go in the sea or under the sea or in the air. But of course, then a few years later, aeroplanes were invented and submarines. Around about the same time, actually, the two were invented. Effective. Engine-powered diesel petrol engine submarines, battery-powered submarines, and aeroplanes. They came out around the same time. So whether she died in I think it was 1907. She died, and she's buried. Dr. Winsper's been to her grave. I forgot the name of the place, but it's somewhere in Lincolnshire where her family comes from, and there's rosaries and flowers. To this day, people venerate this woman, Teresa Higginson, and they're trying to get her to become a saint. She may be canonised eventually by the Pope. Only the Pope can make that decision. But someone asked in the Q&A about whether there was any connection here to paranormal and supernatural phenomenon, because she was active. She lived through she was quite young when she died. She lived through the late 19th and early 20th century, which was the heyday of psychical research. The sort of 1870s to the beginning of the Great War. It picked up after the war, of course, with people like Harry Price. Helen Duncan was very active during that period. Helen Duncan was born right about just before the turn of the 20th century, and she was very active after the Great War. But is there a connection there with psi research? And gave very interesting answers. I can't remember exactly what her answers were. Richard Freeman was the next speaker, talking about the Yeti in India. He's been on an expedition to India. He's been everywhere as Richard. He's like really... I joked with him at dinner, you must have a really strong immune system because you've been in every part of the world where most people don't go. The Yeti, the abominable snowman. It's a mistranslation, actually, from Chinese. It's not actually white. Now, you would expect it to... Creatures that live in snow are often white as camouflage, like the Arctic fox, and some birds actually change their plumage. They have winter plumage, which is white, and then they change their plumage to brown in the spring. It's like the capercaillie in Scotland. It lives in the remote areas of Scotland where it always snows in winter, and they have bright white plumage all winter because of the snow. That's camouflage. But the Yeti doesn't actually go that high. There's nothing for them to eat that high in the mountains. So in India, they tend to live where there's forest further down south, further down where there is no snow, and where it's the landscape is snow-free around the year round, where there's more to eat for the Yeti. But the Yeti's like the Bigfoot. It's described as being brown, black, or ginger in colour. And Richard described how he went to this area in northeastern India looking for the Yeti, putting up trail cameras, looking for footprints, things like that. He's found lots of witness testimony have seen it, lots of artwork showing it, dating back through mythology. He suspects it is an upright ape of some kind, like Bigfoot, and it exists. Nathan Jackson, he's an interesting chap. He's a very eccentric young man. I think he's about the same age as my daughter. He's really, really precocious, though. He's very, very bright, likeable chap. He talked about the cryptids of Madagascar. Now, Madagascar is best known for the Hollywood animated films showing these lemurs. But Madagascar is a real place. It's huge. It's the fourth biggest island in the world, and it's unique. It's been separated from the rest of the world for so long. It has some unique creatures, including an entire clade of primates called lemurs. Lemurs only live in Madagascar, but they are a type of primate, so they're similar to apes and monkeys. And Bernard Hovelmans, who's often called the father of cryptozoology, he was a 19th century Hovelmans. He was a 19th century biologist who really founded the modern science of cryptozoology. And Jonathan Downes is always going on about Hovelmans, how he reads Hovelmans' books when he was a kid. He did a tour of Madagascar, and mentions like the lemur, which is, and some are non-arboreal, like they're on the ground, which is unusual. I mean, there's complete non-arboreal apes. There's only one species of those left in the world, and that's ourselves. You're looking at one in the mirror. But the actual lemurs, there are some non-arboreal lemurs as well. There's also this thing, this very strange lemur called a Tratatrata, supposedly extinct in the 16th century. Nathan believes it still might exist. They're also non-lemur primates with their feet pointing backwards, which is strange. So when people try to track them down, they very often can't go the wrong way. There's some that they're thought maybe they are primitive humans of some kind, like Neanderthals or something similar, and they may still be around. Madagascar's like 4th biggest island in the world, not widely populated, has a small population. And there's also a bovid creature, a cow-like creature, said to live there, which has 3 sets of horns and can go into the water. It's maybe a bit like a hippo, can go into the water. There's a fossa. Now, a fossa is a large cat, which is predatory. Again, said to be extinct, maybe still exists. There's a bat, supposedly, with a 7-foot wingspan. That's huge. That's the biggest, I think the biggest bat is the flying fox, which has a 3-foot wingspan. This is 7 feet. There's a thing like a donkey. That was called a manga larsok. Manga larsok. Manga sahok, sorry. And there's a thing called the rook, which may be related to the roc. The roc is a creature from Middle Eastern mythology. It appears in the Arabian Nights. It's a giant bird of prey, similar to an eagle, but it's about the size of an airliner. It's said to be able to pick up an elephant. Enormous. Supposedly there were some rock feathers and eggs found. It may be a different kind of thing called a crown eagle. But there's a thing called an elephant bird, which is a large flightless bird, 10 feet tall. Very, very big, like the ostrich, but much bigger. It's similar to the moa of New Zealand. There used to be a very large flightless bird called the moa in New Zealand. It was killed off by the Maoris when they arrived. But it was like an ostrich, but it was like much, much bigger. I've seen a skeleton one of them in a museum in Oxford. There's some moa bones. These are all said to be extinct, but maybe they still exist according to Nathan. It's possible they still exist somewhere out there. There's supposed to be a horned crocodile 60 feet long, a giant tortoise, a sea monster, and probably the most disturbing thing of all, man-eating trees. Not trees that literally always only eat men, but trees, carnivorous trees, large carnivorous plants that are willing to target larger animals. This takes us back to Tarzan, because the old Tarzan films, which I loved so much when I was a kid, the ones with Johnny Weissmuller, they often feature these strange creatures, giant spiders, indeed trees that can eat large creatures, including humans. They basically trap them, constrict them like an anaconda, and then digest them. So in the same way a Venus flytrap catches flies, these trees can eat larger animals. So the problem with that is because, of course, trees can't move. So the kind of creatures they'll be after, the kind of creatures that, including humans and other large land fauna, probably have the intelligence simply to avoid them. There's not what they can do. The final speaker was Andrew Ross. Now, he was a little bit, you could see he wasn't used to public speaking, and he was reading from notes a lot of the time, and he was a bit unsure of himself in terms of his speaking. I think he's new to it, but he did a good job considering. He did a good job. He did an informative thing about County Durham, and especially the city of Durham and the ghosts that were there. He told a sad story about Durham Cathedral, and there's a student in the university next door thought he failed his exams because they put the wrong results up on the wall. They displayed it wrongly. He killed himself, and apparently he does haunt the halls of residence. There's a bell ringer apparently in Durham Cathedral snatched by a flying creature. I've seen Durham Cathedral actually. And there's something weird about it. Cathedrals themselves are weird places. I mean, cathedrals are very old. I mean, they're like, people think, well, they're just big churches in the middle of town. They're very old. I mean, they're around about the cathedral building age now is about 1,000 years ago, just under 800 to 1,000 years ago. A time of great superstition and very low technological advancement, the heart of the Middle Ages. Yet somehow there was a society that could produce these structures that are so complex and so full of architectural engineering wonders. You think, how do they do it? To this day, they still dominate our city skylines. Most of them are still standing. A few have been lost, such as the old St Paul's Cathedral was destroyed in the Great Fire of London. A couple were destroyed in World War II. But most of them are still standing. They have these gargoyles all over them, which is like strange creatures. Now, Andrew didn't mention this. I just thought I'd bring it in. There's a whole lot of things I could say about cathedrals. They're absolutely, and I have done before, and I'll bring up the subject of cathedrals again, because I think they're fascinating. They're not just big churches in the middle of town. They have fee proportions encoded into them. But anyway, Andrew was talking about how one of the bell rings was apparently snatched by a flying creature that had been hiding in the belfry. This then ties in with thought about, well, what are gargoyles? What do they represent? Maybe they represent the kind of creatures that lived in places like that. Apparently there are tunnels under Durham Cathedral. There's an old courthouse. There's somebody explored the tunnel. I heard something similar near Rosslyn Chapel. A guy with bagpipes went into the tunnel, and he was never seen again. But he played his bagpipes so people would know where he was because they could hear him. But then he disappeared. I mean, this brave soul, they managed to get to do that. There's all kinds of strange coaches and horses, ghost coaches and horses sitting around. There's a strange creature with the head of a pig, and that reminds me very much of the Pigman of Cannock Chase. I don't know if you've ever read the book about that. There's a book, I forgot the name of the author, quite a young chap, called The Pigman and Other Secrets of Cannock Chase. A UFO was seen in the village of Pittington. I'll have to ask Truth Seekers Northeast about this, because they know about these sort of things. And it was seen at a crossroads, and the guy called the police, and he was like, really weird. And there was this haunted hotel where the England cricket team used to stay, and apparently some of them made comments. Some of the team members from around about 20 or 30 years ago have made comments about this. I'll have to look into this. I wonder if anyone has, if Shane Warne has come back to anyone yet. I do wonder. There's the classic story of the Lambton worm, which is actually not a worm, it's a snake. The word worm in the old days used to mean something, not just a little harmless creature that crawls in the earth. Yeah, it's a very, it's obviously a very spooky place, and Andrew Ross clearly, he says, if you ever go there, there's fascinating resources of paranormal phenomena in that county and in that city of Durham. Yeah, I did find him interesting. As I said, he's obviously not an experienced public speaker, and he did the best he could, though, I think, and his talk was very informative. So now that brings us to the end of this list of all the speakers that were there. That's my reviews of all the speakers. Belated, I'm sorry they're belated, but better late than never.
Well, good morning, everyone. It is about 7:30 at junction 21 of the M6. I'm going to be heading home soon. It's a wet day. A lot of the temperature's a bit milder now. It seems to have gone back to normal. Rain and mildness. Yeah. I had a bit of trouble dropping off to sleep last night. I get insomnia every so often, usually about once a week. It's the usual thing. I tend to have like unpleasant thoughts when I'm going to sleep, and that's enough to like keep me awake for like hours. And I put the thoughts out of my head, and I try to think of daisies in meadows, as my mum used to say. But the damage was sort of done. I don't know if I'm the only one who gets that kind of effect. But it didn't last long. What I did, there's several things you can do. What I did was I switched on the TV, and there was a program called Alien Invasion Hudson Valley. It's a pretty good UFO program. Yeah, it had Erica Lukes in it, and they were doing sky watching. MUFON were there doing sky watching and investigating abductions and things. Right up my street, just perfect. It must have been made for me. So now I'm going to have one last wonderful Premier Inn breakfast, and then it's that long slog back to reality, or so-called reality.
as usual. Yep. Post-conference blues, guys. Yeah, won't last long. Okay, this is the favourite bit for some people. It's souvenirs. So we begin with my T-shirt. They're happy because they eat lard. That's one of my lard prizes, my lard eating prizes. That's good. Issued by the Lard and Information Council. We have the Ocean of Lard, which is a good old-fashioned choose-your-own adventure book. Oh, sorry. Choose your own mindfuck fest. Oh dear. Choose from a bunch of different endings and shit. Oh my goodness me. Look at it. Oh my goodness me. I don't think this is the sort of thing kids used to have. I don't think they allow this sort of thing for kids. Oh, God, blimey. I hope I don't get some adventures in this anyway. It's a sort of like erotic version of these choose your own adventure books. Alright, well I'll work my way through it. And that's my notebook. That's my moisturiser. Need a lot of that. So I get dry skin a lot. That's my toothbrush. Now this is my lapis car sticker. I don't have a car, but I'll find somewhere to stick that. This is a card I got from this guy who was there. Spurious Transient Bandcamp. .bandcamp.com. Yeah, he's like a musician, but he still produces vinyl records and things. You know, it's comes from Wales. Spurious Transients, and they have a kind of UFO theme. He got some old magazines. I showed you a store. If you remember. That's my phone charger. That's my camera charger. This is my Manchester A to Z, which is going to be coming. That's going to come in very handy later on. I actually got that when I went to the CMR conference years ago. It's back in 2012, I think that was. Still got it. Yeah. Oh, this is a book that was given to me by my Welsh friend. What the Uninvited. I've heard of this by Clive Harold. The story is you'll wish it wasn't. Oh. The story is true, you'll wish it wasn't, sorry. And it's actually an expansion on a story that's in the other book I got from Sufon, the book they gave me by Randall Jones Pugh and the other guy, about the Dyfed Enigma. It's about 1977, an ordinary family living in South Wales and things. It is a kind of expansion on one of the chapters in that book. Looks interesting. And it's a first edition, yeah, no barcode, 95p, what dates it, doesn't it, yeah. It's from about the same time, 1979, yeah, about the same time period. This is my politically incorrect reading book. This is my ufological reading book. And these are my pens. Okay, and that was this particular trip's souvenirs. I don't know how much you can hear me. I'm in a bus stop here waiting for the bus. I've got another 10 minutes to go before it arrives. It's a busy main road, so I'll speak as loudly as I can. It seems like I've never been away from traffic the whole time, apart from when I was at the venue in the little village. Oh yeah, the little village. I've just heard some horrible news. Apparently they've been informed recently, the Rixton Glazebrook area has been informed that HS2 will be passing through it. Oh dear. That's obviously devastating news if that happens. I mean, unfortunately, it is too late now, I think, to stop the phase one. That is the branch from London to Birmingham. It's probably too late to stop that now. It could be done, but I mean the graders are in there. They've cut down trees. They're building up embankments and they're cuttings and things like that, and digging tunnels. Not enough tunnels. They didn't dig a tunnel under the Chilterns like they promised. And but they've recently cancelled one of the branches. They cancelled the one. There was going to be two branches, one from Birmingham to Leeds and one from Birmingham to Manchester. They've cancelled the Leeds side, which is great news. That's excellent news. They've cancelled the Leeds side, but we can only hope that the same is done to the Manchester side. That's the problem. It's an awful thing. I mean, I don't have to reiterate the points I made
in my film was it HS2? Is it called HS2 as a poo or something like that? I can't remember. What did I call it? I can't remember what I called it, but I made an entire video about HS2 about how useless it was, how awful it was, how pointless. This is meaningless destruction. It seems meaningless destruction is the name of the game in today's world. It's the way that's how they always do things. Oh dear. Obviously I'll keep you posted with that if I find out more, but it'll be a tragedy for HS2 to go through that lovely little area. With the ye old Red Lion and the Black Swan and the Eagle and Child and those little churches and things. Those green fields and the woods. Oh, just all I can do is hope for the best and hope that doesn't happen. Hope something changes, but it feels helpless at the moment. I feel helpless. I really do. I can't control these things. I can just keep doing what I'm doing and speaking out, but I feel ineffectual. So it's a very horrible feeling. Look at this. No smoking. It's against the law to smoke in this bus shelter. It's the open air, for goodness sake. It's the open air. Oh my goodness me, what else are we not allowed to do? Can I fart in here? Going back past the venue. You recognise this, but we've seen it from the top of a bus now. And there is the Black Swan.
It's got a 20-foot potato in it.
And there's the venue. Goodbye. Till next time. Oh guys, it's 20 to 11. It's quite a long bus journey actually. Between it's about an hour and a half between Warrington and Manchester. I've actually got another hour and a half to kill before I get my coach. So I've got time to do a few things here while I'm in Manchester. Take advantage of the opportunity of being here again. And see a few things. What I want to get. One thing I definitely want to get is I want to get a shot of one of the classic old canals, which I'll insert into the earlier scene where I talk about the Manchester Pusher. So I'm going to do that, and I'm here right now at the. You'll recognise this if you're a regular viewer of Rich Planet TV. I'm at the Manchester Evening News Arena, and I'm just going to have a quick look up there and just check the place out. This is where the bang happened a few years ago. The bang, as it's called. Well, that's what it was literally. We know that's all we know about it. It was a very, very loud explosion, a noise. But I can't get up there. I have to go around the side. Okay, it's all sealed off at the moment, but can I get around the side? I'll just have a look, see if I can get around the side. They've got barriers up there now. Let's see, I mean, there's some people up there who look like security guards. They might stop me filming. I can't do a kind of Charlie Veach thing where I go, oh, but this is a public highway when it's private property. But I'll just have a look and see what's up here, because here we go. Huntsbank entrance. Remove all items from pockets. Well, I'm not removing all my items from the pockets. We'll have a look what's up here anyway. Oh, this is I think this is a stall. There's going to be stalls here. Oh, prior to entering, remove all items from pockets. Ticket holders only. I'm just curious to see actually if someone does stop me. Lift to the arena. Let's have a look. I know you, because I've seen this. If you want to find out what I'm talking about, you need to go to richplanet.net and look up for the Night of the Bang. And there's a kind of like there's like the main arena, which looks like a kind of sports stadium, and the actual entrance hall is built onto the side of it. It looks like it's been built later as an extension. But there's a kind of little bridge thing here, like you see here. And over there's Manchester Victoria Station, which is where it leads to. But here is the actual place, you see, I think. Yeah, that's where it happened. Well, supposedly happened. All we know is there was a loud noise. Then it was announced there'd been an explosion. Some people had been killed and some people had been injured. There's not much to see in there. But what really happened is another matter. I think there's another question. That's something we'll find out, I think. And maybe in due course. I hope so, anyway. But I'm not going to get a shot of it from inside Victoria Station. Although, I don't know, I think you've seen everything there is to see, really. There's not much else. But, no, I don't need to repeat what other people have said and done. But go to richplanet.net, look for The Night of the Bang. It's a full-length documentary by Richard D. Hall, which I think is pretty definitive. I was on the fence for a long time on this matter, but I'm not anymore. So that there is the Manchester Evening News Arena. I wouldn't make a special journey to come here, but seeing as I'm in the area, I might as well make the most of being here. Okay, onwards into Manchester. Very good.
Hello. Thank you.
Okay. Well, welcome to the Arndale Centre in Manchester. Once again, I have to point out the irony that the only structures modern society builds that matches the grandeur of the medieval cathedrals are these temples to consumerism. Ironic, isn't it? I'm in a bookshop now, just in Waterstones at the Arndale Centre. I'm just curious. Fiction A to Z by author. Let's have a look. Camus, Carey, Carroll, Braid, I don't know, so Coogan. Let's see. D. E. Ellis, Ellison, Elton, MHE. Ennard. They haven't got my books, they haven't got Emlyn Jones. This is a lousy bookshop. Never shop here again. Oh, right. Well, I'm back here again. It's been a while since I've been here. Digworth Coach Station in Birmingham. No, it's the most pleasant place in the world by any stretch of the imagination. And as always in Birmingham, they're building something. And so the coach had to go on this massive loop. What's more, I made a mistake. I misread my ticket. Luckily not boarding, but I misread my ticket and thought that the coach was actually late. And I thought, are they going to hold up the connection for me? They sometimes do. It depends how many people are wanting to get on the connection. But if a coach is late, sometimes they will hold another service back until the coach has arrived, so that the connectees can board. If connectees is the right word. Oh, it wasn't a bad journey, quite a short journey. Straight down the M6, you know, it's not too bad. Because it's straight out of Manchester, no stops, just straight to Birmingham. That's not bad, that is. An hour and 3/4 is not bad for that journey. And I'm back in this is the Irish quarter of Birmingham. There's loads of Irish pubs here, there's one over there. And it wasn't a bad journey. The coach was very crowded, every seat full, I think, almost every seat. I sat next to, the person who came and sat next to me was this young teenage girl who was quite well behaved. Didn't fuck around playing loud music or rabbiting on her phone really loudly. This bloke in front of me, on the seat in front, he kept trying to recline. And he kept trying to recline, and I couldn't, because I was in the seat with someone else, I had to keep my legs in. My knees were jammed up against the seat in front. This fucker kept trying to recline and recline and recline. And he was like, he was throwing himself, you know, he's one of these people who, you know, sitting forward, sitting backwards and rolling round. Still better than train though. Still less stressful than the train by a long stretch. Long stretch. And now I've got to get another coach. Luckily, I only have half an hour to wait, and so I won't have to spend very long in this benighted land. Well, I'm on the last leg of my journey home now. I'm glad to get out of Digbeth coach station. I was remembering, actually, I forgot. Do you remember that time I was there during the night? And it was like 3 AM. I went to probe. I've been trying to read, but all I seem to want to do is sleep. Sleep. So, I just said I had insomnia last night for only about 2 hours. I shouldn't be this tired. Maybe it's just post-conference blues. I actually got a text from my Welsh friend, and she said, "Oh, I've been really feeling sad and down because of the Lost Generation talk and a bit of post-conference blues." Yeah, I know, it's not just me. Where am I? I'm going down a dark tunnel. Could be anywhere in the world. No, I'm not in McDonald's. Those are all the same. I know I've been to McDonald's in Australia. I'm back in Oxford. And there's nowhere else like Oxford. But yeah, I'm coming. I finally got home. Well, I've got a bit of a walk to get home now. I'm not getting the bus. I'm an ex-hospital porter. Ex-hospital porters do not use buses very often when we feel like it. Look, yeah, it's been a good conference, and it's like, it just goes to show, you know, how different the alternative world is. There's far more variety, far more. What the hell is this? So I just noticed this. Standing with Giants. Monumental Solidarity Project. You can pause and read this. I don't know. There it is anyway. It's probably got something to do with Ukraine. Oh, anyway. Oh, I'm on the subject. Look, Blackwell's. What flag are Blackwell's flying? Yeah, the coronavirus has been forgotten officially, ladies and gentlemen. Yes. This is the new normie drug of choice. Ukraine. A country in Eastern Europe that most of them couldn't even bloody point to on a map. Oh, I'm getting distracted already by normality. Yeah, I was talking about the conference. Yeah, in the alternative world, there is more variety than anywhere in the mainstream. Far more than you're going to get anywhere else. It's just like so incredible. Oh yeah, not for me, thanks. You too, cheers. There's literally so much variety. I mean, on the subject of Ukraine, now there's a lot of A lot of people, I think, in the alternative sphere would scoff at some of the people who go to Weird Weekend North. Because in some of them, not all of them, some of them are just literally, simply normies who believe in the paranormal. On every other subject, they're pretty much normie. So, in that way, Steve Bassett is a bit like that. Steve Bassett, as much as I love him, I mean, he's so good, he's so dedicated. He's such a cool guy. But he's basically a normie who believes in UFOs. Everything else, every other subject, he just merges seamlessly. On every other subject, he just merges seamlessly with the mainstream. With Normieville, he's just he's got a house in the middle of Normieville, and he just happens to have a little room dedicated to UFOs. And when I was at Weird Weekend North, I mean, you may even seen them on camera. I didn't deliberately film them, but there were people with Ukraine flags on their lapels and things like that. There are people, I don't know, I didn't see anyone masked. Something anyway. But they were very, there are people who simply, like I say, they would be completely opposed to my views on other matters outside ghosts, cryptids, things like that. And but you know, I still felt I was a part of their world. I still felt an affinity with them. Maybe that's because what I do is Steve Bassett. You know, I've never been to the X-Con. He doesn't do the X-Con anymore. But if I had gone there, I'd have felt completely at home. Completely at home. I seem to have a level of tolerance. I'm not trying to blow my own trumpet, but I seem to have a level of tolerance that is rare within the alternative sphere. And I mean, that's not. Some would see that as a sign of weakness. I don't think it is. For example, you know, I've got friends who are flat earthers. You know, I've got it's things like that. You know, you see me debating flat earthers. It's I just don't get angry with people for having different ideologies. And why is that? Why is it when so many other people do? So many other people get furious when they meet someone who disagrees with them on something they feel strongly about, to the point where they will almost immediately spiral downwards into recrimination. Why don't I? Possibly because I think it's possibly because of my experience with Team Droik. Maybe my experience with Team Droik, going down Queen's Lane now, through the heart of Oxford, under the Bridge of Sighs. La 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 da 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 da. La 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 la. No, I'm not going to start singing. It's all too beautiful. That's a song actually by Small Faces. That song is actually about Oxford. It's a song by Small Faces about Oxford. I actually had an American tourist come up to me once and say, "Excuse me, sir, could you please tell me the way to Ichiku Park?" And I said, "Look, I'm sorry, Ichiku Park doesn't exist. It's from a song. It's just from a song. It's from a song about Oxford, but it doesn't exist." Oh, where was I? Yeah, I think it may be Team Droik. It may simply because I have been, you know, I've been doing this a long time. I mean, ever since Team Droik have been after me for my entire internet career. Literally since long before I started at Panwo. You know, from like the early 2000s when I was posting on the old Dark Conspiracy forum. That's when the Droik trolls first located me. Then they followed me onto the official David Icke forum. Well, there was the original David Icke forum, which was disaffiliated because there were some right idiots on there who were posting criminally obscene material. And then there was the official David Icke forum. The Droiks were on there as well. And I suppose I've got a very, very thick skin. After you've dealt with the things they've done, things I wouldn't even repeat on camera, some of the things they've said. I've had to call the police to these people. Someone says, you know, I think the Earth's a flat disc, you know, and there's a firmament above us, which is like just a dome. How can I get angry with somebody like that when I've had people accusing me and calling me, spreading rumours about me, of me doing criminal activities and being morally reprehensible, hurling abuse at me, threatening me. How can I be angry with someone who simply says, you know, the Earth's a flat plane, you know? Yeah, it's a bit like, what was it C.S. Lewis said? How can you fear an earthworm after you've been confronted with a rattlesnake? Yeah, anyway, this is why I don't begrudge any of the people in Weird Weekend North. You know, a lot of them would disagree with me on many other issues. You know, that's why I can have friends who are skeptics. That's why, you know, I can talk in a civilised manner to Glenn Vaudrey and also to Deborah Hatswell, even though they can't bear to be in the same, I was going to say the same room as each other, the same county as each other. See what I mean? It's like the world's too small a place to make a fuss about beliefs, I think. I don't think people who have different beliefs, people have beliefs which beliefs I consider extremely destructive and reprehensible. I don't believe in malicious people. I've talked before about Paola Harris. She has ideas in her head which I think are some of the most destructive in all of ufology. But I don't believe she's a bad person. I believe she holds those beliefs because she doesn't see the malevolence of them. I talk more about that. By the way, if you want to know what I'm talking about in detail about Paola Harris, go to my video called Women in Ufology. I talk in more detail about that. So getting angry with people like that and, you know, calling them names, then are they going to be less or more likely to change their minds? Rhetorical question. Anyway, this commentary's taking a bit longer than I expected. I'm now coming out of Queen's Lane onto the High, where the traffic gets very busy, and you won't be able to hear me as well. But anyway, I'll continue anyway. I think Richard Freeman must be the best MC of any conference I've ever been to. He's so funny. I mean, he's a guy I've known. I've been reading his books long before I actually met him and got to know him. I've been reading his books, and he's such a funny guy. He really is, and he really made that conference so hilarious with his he had these little glove puppets, and there was like a monkey glove puppet. He said it was an orang pendek. He also had a little like rodent glove puppet. He says this is Jeff the mongoose. I'm sorry, an orang pendek and Jeff the mongoose. And he's like, he really doesn't care about. He just says what he thinks. He doesn't care about anything. I really admire that. He likes. You know, the reason I got into the lard eating competition in 2017 was he was baiting us really badly. When he said southern pussies, I think that was the last straw, and I said right. But he was funny. I mean, I'm going to bring up Rudyard Kipling because there's an important thing I want to say about Mike Halliwell's book. I want to add a little bit more about that. But he loves Kipling. He loves the Jungle Book. It's like a classic piece of children/young adult fiction. And he says, the Disney film. I saw the Disney film long before I actually read the books. But I read one of the books. I read a bit of a book. There's a book called Kim. I read a bit of that as well. He said, as always, Disney messes things up. Very often it does. Its Disney adaptations are very Americanized and not as good. But I'll try to speak up. And Richard made me laugh. He says, oh, you got to read them. And he says, anyone who says it's all white male patriarchal imperialism, just fuck off. He said this on stage. They can fuck off. The thing about the reason I want to bring up Kipling is Rudyard Kipling writes exceedingly good books. Yeah, he does. He writes exceedingly good books. You'd have to be in the haunted generation to know what I'm talking about there. Yes, he not only writes exceedingly good books, he is a poet as well as a prose writer, and he's written loads of some very, very famous poems. You know, the If poem, that's the one that David Icke likes. That's very good. If you know that you can do this, then you'll be a man, my son. And it gives a list of all the challenges you have to face. But he's also, but he wrote another poem. He wrote a poem about imaginary friends from childhood. I mean, he is called Binker. And believe it or not, it's actually in Richard Dawkins' book, The God Delusion. Of all the books, I heard about this in The God Delusion. Dawkins has an entire chapter in The God Delusion dedicated to the imaginary friend phenomenon, which is, I think he's trying to associate ghosts and things like imaginary friends with God, the God hypothesis. But I can't remember the words of the poem, but it's Binker is good, Binker's kind. No one can see, I can't remember the poem itself, you can look it up. But Binker's good, Binker's kind. They have friends, but they haven't got... All the adults have friends, but they haven't got Binker, and it's about this child's imaginary friend. And I just thought to myself, because, you know, I've spoke before, but I've made 2 videos about Drop Dead Fred, Harvey. These are classic movies about imaginary friends. In the case of Harvey, it's about an adult who's sort of like an eccentric adult who has an imaginary friend. In the case of Drop Dead Fred, it's about a woman whose imaginary friend from childhood comes back into her life. And even though in Harvey, you're given no doubt in Harvey that the rabbit is actually real. It's actually revealed as a real thing. In Drop Dead Fred, it's always kind of ambiguous. However, the point is that, and I'm keen to read, when the CFZ republishes Mike Halliwell's book, I'm keen to read it in VisiKids. I show you know, Dan was showing it to you, that book there, he's had a first edition which is very rare, but it's going to be re-released. Now, you see, and this is actually, in Dawkins' book it mentions this, the kids with the imaginary friends, you know, when they, he interviewed somebody who had this imaginary friend as a child, and she said, "I know, I stopped." He went away eventually. He came to me actually. He said he had to go away, but he was real. No, it wasn't just my imagination. I could see him. He was there. He was real. And if you read, oh God, it's like, it makes you feel sad. It's quite moving actually. I don't know. I was thinking, surely most of you have read the Roswell trilogy by now, haven't you? You'll know this subject comes up in the Roswell trilogy. I include this as a plot element, the childhood imaginary friend, which is not just imaginary, in those books. And is it possible, like, and I'm keen to read it. Mike Halliwell, actually, I know he gets a lot of criticism. He's an unusual chap. He seems to have like changed his ideas on many things, but he's very, you know, he's been criticised a lot because he wrote for paranormal magazines and things like that, and wrote paranormal books. Then he's become a Muslim. He's converted to Islam. Now I don't have a problem with that. Some of my best friends are Muslims, as the saying goes. No, well, it's literally true. Some of my brother porters are Muslims, and that's more than just friends. You know, no one's more important to me than my brother porters. But he was very. When I don't think I've ever told you this before. When I got suspended, there's no point. There's no harm in telling you now. It's all this time later. It's 11 years ago almost. When I got suspended in 2011, you know, he got in touch with me. I spoke on the phone to him, and because I was accused of being racist, and he said, "No, it's not racist. I understand the joke you're making, Ben." And this is coming from a Muslim himself, a convert no less. And he understood me, and he knew there was no harm being done. And the point is, though, that the point is it possible that children actually are able to see these beings for real? These are like beings from subtle realms. I've taken a long time to get to this particular thing. I've taken a long time to get to what I really want to say. The point I want to make. Get to the point, Ben. Get to the point. Is it possible that children are able to see the inhabitants of non-physical realities and its ability they then lose as they get older. In some cases, like in the case of Richard Dawkins' correspondent, the individual, the actual imaginary friend, so-called, comes to the child and says, "I'm going to have to leave you now. You're getting too old for all this. You know, if I stay with you, you know, you won't fit in with other humans," things like that. Is it possible that children have that ability and then they lose it as they get older? Some children, not all. So if you've got a child and they have an imaginary friend, it's something you should encourage. It's something you should... I would treat the child's stories of imaginary friends as if they are real. If the child says they're real, I would work from the assumption that the child is telling the truth and that what they're actually perceiving is really real. I would say that. Louisa never had an imaginary friend. Louisa had a very vivid imagination, and I encourage that. She didn't have an imaginary friend as such. It's all too often, you know, when kids start talking about imaginary friends, some parents start going, "Oh God, no! There's something wrong with them. You've got to stop that! Stop that! Don't talk like that! I'm going to take you to the doctors." And this happens, of course, in Roswell Revealed. But anyway, I've got to cross over the road somehow. Oh, how am I going to cross over this road? That's a weird building, isn't it? The Flory building. Very Illuminati. Only kidding. I've got to get over the conference fever now, I really do. Anyway, it's been a good conference. I've enjoyed it. It's over now, but there'll be another one next year. And, well, I've got every intention of being there. Thank you all of you for watching Hapanwo TV. Hospital Porters, Pride and Dignity. Stop the New World Order.